Hey guys, tonight we are venturing back in time deep into the medieval era to explore a place that stirred fear and wonder in equal measure, a vast ancient forest, one that pilgrims swore felt alive. Imagine the dense canopy overhead, so thick it blots out the sun, leaving you in perpetual twilight. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth, decaying leaves, and something else you can't quite place. Something older, perhaps. Your worn leather boots sink slightly into the muddy track, every step a weary effort. The silence here isn't empty. It feels heavy, watchful, punctuated only by the snap of a twig somewhere just out of sight or the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. It's easy to get lost, easier still to imagine you're not alone even when you see no one. In this world where the unknown truly began just beyond the plowed fields, forests weren't just trees, they were thresholds, wild and unpredictable domains, teeming with both real and imagined dangers. You probably won't survive the sheer boredom of learning about medieval forestry, but hey, a little intellectual peril builds character, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from tonight and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey begins long before you even reach the edge of this particular wood. You've been traveling for weeks, maybe months. The road, when it exists, is a rutted, muddy track, barely wide enough for a cart, often forcing you into single file. There are no comfortable inns every few miles, no cheerfully lit towns promising warmth and safety around the next bend. Instead, you rely on the charity of monasteries, the grudging hospitality of isolated hamlets, or simply the dubious shelter of a ditch under a meager blanket. Medieval travel was less scenic road trip and more extreme survival challenge. You faced rain that turned the path into a swamp, winds that cut like knives, and the constant low-level anxiety of encountering bandits or worse. A well-known fact of medieval life is that travel was incredibly hazardous and slow, making any significant journey a major undertaking reserved for necessity, trade, warfare, or in your case, pilgrimage. You carry your few possessions on your back or loaded onto a pack animal if you're lucky enough to afford one. Your clothes are practical but rough wool or linen, often patched and stained. Every muscle aches, your feet blister, and the persistent chill seems to have settled deep into your bones. As you draw closer to the region containing this infamous forest, the signs of civilization, that thin veneer of tilled fields, scattered cottages, and well-worn paths, begin to thin out. The land becomes rougher, less managed. The woods you've skirted or passed through before were often managed coppiced for wood grazed by pigs, showing the hand of man however lightly. But this forest is different. It looms on the horizon like a bruised cloud, dark and unbroken. Locals you've met in the last few villages speak of it in hushed tones crossing themselves. They tell stories not just of wolves or bears, dangers you've learned to live with, though always warily, but of things that lurk deeper, things that don't have claws or teeth in the way you understand. These are the places where the old ways, the pagan beliefs still held sway, in the shadows where the Christian God's influence felt weaker. The boundary between the known world and the wild was stark in the medieval period. Beyond the village fields lay the waste, a term that didn't just mean empty, but often meant uncultivated, untamed, and thus dangerous. The forest was the quintessential waste. It was the realm of wild animals, yes, but also of outlaws, hermits, and in the popular imagination, supernatural beings. Fairies, wood spirits, trolls, or even demonic forces were thought to reside in the deep woods. A quirky historical tidbit is that medieval people believed that trees themselves could have spirits, or that certain groves were inherently sacred or cursed. Entering a vast ancient forest was not like entering a park today. It was stepping into another world, one governed by different rules, older laws. As you stand at the edge of this particular forest, the sheer scale of it is daunting. Trees, ancient and massive, stretch toward the sky, their lowest branches thick as younger trees. The air feels different here, cooler, heavier, carrying a damp, earthy smell that's almost overwhelmingly rich. Sunlight struggles to penetrate the dense canopy, casting long, distorted shadows even in the middle of the day. The path that leads into it is narrow, quickly swallowed by encroaching undergrowth. It looks less like a deliberate track and more like a scar grudgingly accepted by the wilderness. Why would anyone enter such a place? Your motivation is simple yet profound faith. You are a pilgrim driven by a vow, seeking spiritual merit, perhaps hoping for a miracle forgiveness for sins or blessings for yourself or loved ones. Pilgrimage was a cornerstone of medieval religious life. And while many routes followed established roads, sometimes the most direct or even penitential path led through less than welcoming territory. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for the average pilgrim was genuine piety, social obligation, or simply a desire for adventure and a break from the drudgery of daily life. Regardless of the exact mix, something deep within compels you to face this daunting barrier. You've heard the stories about this forest, the strange occurrences, the way it seems to shift and confound those who enter. Maybe that just makes the potential spiritual reward for traversing it even greater, a true test of faith. Or maybe you just didn't have a map, and this seemed like the only way. Medieval GPS was notoriously unreliable, mostly involving asking a nervous-looking local who would point vaguely towards a tree line and mutter something about not straying from the path if you could find one. You take a deep breath, the air cool and smelling intensely of damp wood and moss. The sounds of the world you know. The distant bleating of sheep, the faint ring of a blacksmith's hammer from the village you left hours ago, fade behind you. Ahead lies only the forest and its palpable silence. It's not just the absence of noise. It's a silence that feels like a held breath, expectant. The trees closest to the edge seem to lean in their bark, gnarled and ancient, looking like faces twisted in perpetual, silent judgment. The ground beneath your feet is no longer the packed earth of a road, but soft, yielding leaf litter and moss making your steps muffled and uncertain. Every shadow seems deeper here, every rustle of leaves more significant. You grip your walking staff tighter, its familiar weight a small comfort. This is it. You are crossing the threshold. The journey through the forest, they say, is alive, has begun. You step fully into the green twilight, and immediately the world shifts. It's not just the light that changes, but the entire feel of the place. The air grows colder, surprisingly so, and thick with a scent that's intensely earthy, damp and maybe sweet, like decaying leaves mixed with something blooming in the perpetual gloom, though you see no flowers. The path, that grudging scar you noticed from the edge, seems to wither the moment you tread upon it. What was a discernible track a few steps back is now just a faint indentation in the leaf litter, quickly swallowed by moss and low-lying ferns. Within 20 yards, you squint, trying to follow where it might have gone, but the ground looks the same everywhere. You're pushing through tangled undergrowth branches, snagging at your clothes, whip-like twigs brushing your face. Every step is uncertain. The forest floor is uneven, hidden roots threaten to trip you, patches of deceptive softness give way to sudden hardness. You're no longer walking on a path. You're simply navigating through the dense wood. The sounds of the outside world are completely gone now, swallowed by the sheer density of the trees. The silence you felt at the edge, it's intensified, becoming a physical presence pressing in on your ears. It's a silence that's too quiet, lacking the usual forest sounds you'd expect. No cheerful bird song, or any bird song for that matter. No buzzing insects, not even the distant chatter of squirrels. There's only the sound of your own breathing, slightly ragged with the effort of pushing through the brush, the muffled thud of your boots on the soft ground, and the rustle of leaves disturbed by your passage. But beneath these sounds, or perhaps layered within, the silence itself, there are other things, subtle things. A faint snap that might have been a twig underfoot somewhere, just out of sight. A soft rustle that could be whined through the leaves, except the air feels perfectly still down here on the forest floor. It's enough to make you pause, head cocked, listening intently. But when you listen harder, the sound is gone, leaving only that profound, watchful silence. This immediate feeling of being cut off, enclosed, and disoriented is profound. It's like the forest doesn't want you here, actively working to confuse you. You try to keep a mental note of the direction you were going, maybe using the faint light filtering through the canopy as a guide, but the light is so diffuse and inconsistent, it's useless. One moment you think you're heading north, the next, the light seems to be coming from a different angle, entirely filtered through swaying branches high above that you can barely see. It's like trying to navigate by a disco ball made of leaves. Mainstream historical sources often describe medieval forests as formidable barriers, not just physically difficult to traverse, but mentally challenging due to the ease of getting lost. For someone used to navigating by the sun or known landmarks, the uniform, dense environment of a deep wood was incredibly disorienting. You find yourself constantly looking around, not just to find a clearer path, but because of that growing sensation. The feeling that you are not alone. It starts subtly a prickling on the back of your neck. You glance over your shoulder expecting to see something, but there's nothing, just the endless, imposing trunks of trees fading into the gloom. Yet the feeling persists. You might catch a fleeting movement in your peripheral vision, a shadow shifting a branch, seeming to move when there's no wind. You whip your head around, but again, nothing concrete to see. The trees themselves contribute to this unease. Their bark is often gnarled and twisted, knotholes and bumps looking uncannily like eyes or distorted faces watching you from the shadows. Ancient branches twist into grotesque shapes like skeletal arms reaching out. It's easy to project your fears onto the natural world when you're deep in the wilderness, isolated and vulnerable. A quirky historical tidbit is that medieval folklore was full of stories about forests that actively misled travelers, either through enchantment by fey creatures or some inherent mysterious property of the place itself. People believed certain places could have a genius loci, a spirit of the place, which might be benevolent, indifferent, or actively malevolent. Getting lost wasn't always seen as navigational error. It could be the forest willing you off the path, leading you deeper into its embrace, or perhaps to a place where you wouldn't be found. It's enough to make you double-check your pockets for that tiny, slightly gnawed piece of blessed bread you brought just in case. Can't hurt, right? You push on the initial excitement of the pilgrimage, tempered by the sheer, unyielding difficulty of movement. You have to duck under low branches, step carefully over fallen logs slick with moss, and constantly push aside thickets of thorny bushes. Your clothes are getting torn, your skin scratched. The silence amplifies the sounds of your own struggling passage, making you feel even more exposed. Every crackle of a dry leaf underfoot seems unnaturally loud. It's exhausting work, far more draining than walking miles on an open road, even a bad one. You find yourself stopping more frequently, ostensibly to catch your breath, but also to just listen, trying to distinguish natural sounds from something else. That something else is the core of the unease. It's the subtle things you can't quite explain away. Did that branch just dip lower on its own? Was that faint whisper the wind or something else? Is the ground feeling different under your feet here? It's not just paranoia born of isolation. It feels like the forest is responding to your presence, a vast, slow-moving entity aware of this small intruder. You might notice that the trees seem to crowd in closer around you, the density of the woods increasing the further you go, as if the forest is actively making it harder to move forward, or perhaps harder to turn back. It's a feeling of being swallowed whole by the environment. Historians still argue whether medieval accounts of forests like this, described with such trepidation and infused with supernatural elements, were simply reflections of the very real dangers and psychological effects of deep wilderness. Predators, bandits getting lost filtered through a superstitious worldview, or if they hint at a deeper, now lost understanding of the natural world, having its own active, albeit perhaps non-supernatural forces at play. Was it just fear of the unknown or something else entirely? Maybe they just didn't have good boots. A decent pair of hiking boots really does change your perspective on the formidable barrier of a forest. You find yourself talking to yourself, just a murmur under your breath, perhaps reciting a prayer, or simply articulating your frustration. The sound of your own voice feels small and fragile against the immense silence of the woods. You try to remember what the villagers said, but their warnings were vague. Don't stray from the path. What path? Be wary of the whispers. The wood remembers. Remembered what exactly? Your packed lunch? Unlikely. The light continues to fade, not because the sun is setting. You have no idea what time it is anymore. The forest is timeless, but because the canopy seems to be closing in overhead. The gloom deepens, turning the already distorted shadows into deeper, more menacing shapes. Every gnarled trunk, every twisted root takes on a more sinister appearance. The air feels colder, still carrying that strange, sweet, earthy smell, more strongly now, almost cloying. You pause again, straining your ears. There. That was definitely a sound. A soft scraping not far off just beyond that thicket of ferns. You hold your breath listening. Silence. Absolute silence again. Just the pounding of your own heart suddenly much louder in your ears. You know you'd think being swallowed by a seemingly sentient ancient forest would be more dramatic. Maybe like evil vines grabbing at you or spooky mist rolling in. But no, it's just a slow, persistent, disorienting unease. Like being in a maze made of trees that subtly rearrange themselves when you're not looking. It's the kind of boring, drawn-out, psychological horror that really gets under your skin. You yearn for the simple, straightforward danger of a wolf. At least you know what to do with a wolf, mostly maybe. This is just creepy and tiring. The feeling of being watched is no longer fleeting or dismissible. It's constant now, a pressure on your back, on your neck. You feel eyes on you from multiple directions, simultaneously unseen gazes, following your every move. It's not hostile, not yet, but intensely curious, probing. It makes you feel like an exhibit in some vast silent museum put on display for an audience you can't see. You resist the urge to yell to demand what's watching you. You learned long ago on this journey that yelling rarely improves a situation, especially in the wilderness. Yelling just attracts attention, and right now the attention you're getting feels like more than enough. You push forward, or what you hope is forward, the forest floor, continuing to be a treacherous mess of roots and undergrowth. The trees seem to lean in closer, still their branches forming a dense, tangled ceiling overhead, the light now barely a memory. You are deep within the wood now, and it feels like it's closing its arms around you. The deeper you venture, the more pronounced the subtle oddities become. It's not just the feeling of being watched anymore. It's the growing certainty that the watching isn't passive. It feels responsive. You might push through a particularly dense patch of thorny bushes only for the branches behind you to snap back into place with unnerving speed and precision, as if the forest floor itself is sighing in annoyance at your passage. A moment later, you hear a distinct rustle to your left, just out of sight. You freeze listening. It sounds like something moving through the undergrowth, maybe a deer, maybe a fox. But it's a strange rustle somehow, too deliberate, too rhythmic. You wait, but the sound doesn't get closer or move away. It just stops, abruptly, as if whatever made it knew you were listening and held its breath. You could swear you feel a shift in the air currents, a brief cold puff that carries that sweet cloying scent again, but stronger this time, almost sickly sweet. It prickles the inside of your nose, and for a second you feel a dizzying sense of disorientation, a brief urge to just lie down right where you are. You try to dismiss it. It's just the wilderness playing tricks on your tired senses, your anxious mind. You're deep in an ancient wood, lost, probably a bit hungry, and maybe regretting that last pasty you ate back in the village that tasted suspiciously like mud. Of course you're jumpy, but the phenomena persist. You step over a large moss-covered log. As your boot clears it, you glance back and swear the log seems to have shifted slightly, settling deeper into the earth, or maybe a branch that was lying across, it has moved. It's gone the second you look directly at it, but the impression is strong. It's like the forest is constantly, almost revealing itself, just staying at the very edge of your perception, playing a quiet, unsettling game. The trees themselves seem to be more active now. Not just the gnarled faces in the bark you imagined earlier. Sometimes you see a branch high up sway violently for a moment when all the surrounding leaves are still. It's a sharp, sudden movement against the backdrop of motionless green. You crane your neck watching, but it doesn't happen again. Just that one isolated, impossible flick. Or maybe you'll notice that the trunk of a tree you just passed feels strangely warm to the touch, even though the air is cold. A faint, almost imperceptible vibration seems to emanate from it, a low hum that feels more felt than heard. It's enough to make you quickly pull your hand away, wiping it instinctively on your tunic, as if you've touched something unclean. This sort of pervasive, low-level strangeness wasn't just spooky bedtime stories in the medieval period. Accounts from travelers and chroniclers often describe forests as places where the normal rules of the world seemed flexible. Mainstream historical records, while often focused on practicalities like road conditions or dangers from bandits, occasionally touch upon the psychological impact of traversing vast, untamed woodlands. Medieval people weren't just scared of wolves, they were scared of the woods themselves. The sheer scale, the lack of familiar landmarks, the easy descent into being completely lost. It was an assault on the senses and the mind for people whose lives were typically constrained to small-known areas. A journey through deep forest wasn't just travel, it was an ordeal. And then there are the sounds again. They are multiplying, becoming more distinct, yet still maddeningly hard to pinpoint. Faint clicks and taps like stones being struck together, or perhaps the sound of roots shifting underground. A low groan that might be the wind, except the leaves are still, and the groan feels deeper, more resonant, like it's coming from the very earth beneath your feet. And the whispers, oh, the whispers. They are just at the edge of audibility, like dry leaves skittering across stone, or maybe wind sighing through pine needles, but they don't sound like that. They sound like muffled voices, indistinct low, just beneath the threshold of understanding. They seem to come from all directions at once, swirling around you, never quite forming coherent words, but carrying a weight, a suggestion of awareness of communication happening just beyond your grasp. It makes you want to cover your ears to shout for them to stop, but you don't. You just keep moving, trying to project an air of determined purpose. You don't feel hoping that whatever this is will lose interest if you seem unimpressed. Like trying to walk past a particularly aggressive street performer without making eye contact. You just keep telling yourself it's the wind, it's your imagination, it's that weird pasty causing auditory hallucinations. But deep down you know it's not. This is too consistent, too focused. A quirky or fringe tidbit about medieval beliefs concerning forests relates to the idea of wild men or woodwoses. While sometimes depicted as simple hairy humans living outside society, other accounts blurred the line between man and nature spirit. These figures were often seen as guardians of the forest, sometimes benign, sometimes hostile, and they were believed to be able to influence the woods around them, guiding or misleading travelers. Some folklore even suggested the woodwose was the forest, or at least a manifestation of its will. So that feeling of being watched, maybe it's not just invisible eyes. Maybe it's the forest personified, curious about the crunchy snack that has stumbled into its pantry. You find yourself stopping again, hand on a tree trunk, trying to feel that vibration, that warmth. It's gone now. The wood feels cool and rough under your palm. You lean your head against it, the bark pressing into your forehead. You close your eyes for a moment, just trying to gather yourself to remember why you are here, pushing through this impossible, unsettling place. The pilgrimage, the goal. Something to focus on besides the oppressive silence and the phantom whispers. But even with your eyes closed, the feeling of being surrounded, of being observed, is overwhelming. Historians still argue whether accounts of wild men or other nature spirits in medieval texts were literal beliefs, metaphorical representations of the dangers and mysteries of the wilderness, or perhaps coded references to isolated communities or hermits living outside conventional society. Was the woodwose a real, if misunderstood person, or a projection of the medieval mind's attempt to grapple with the untamed? The texts are often ambiguous, leaving plenty of room for academic head-scratching and late-night debates over lukewarm coffee. Much like trying to figure out if that weird noise you just heard was a branch falling or a forest spirit doing interpretive dance. You open your eyes. The light has shifted again, or maybe the trees have. It's definitely darker, even though it doesn't feel like much time has passed. The green twilight is deepening into a heavy bruised purple hue. The air feels heavier, too almost humid despite the cold. The sweet, earthy smell is now overpoweringly strong, almost suffocating. It feels like you're breathing in the very essence of the forest, and that essence feels thick and ancient and alive. Not just living in the way a plant lives, but aware, conscious. Every step forward is a struggle now. Not just physically, though that remains true. The undergrowth seems thicker than ever, the roots more numerous and determined to trip you. But psychologically, it's draining. Every sound, every shadow, every rustle sends a jolt of anxiety through you. You find yourself flinching constantly, your muscles tense. You're not just lost, you're trapped in a place that seems to be actively trying to mess with your head. It's less a physical obstacle course and more a slow-motion psychological thriller directed by a very patient, very unsettling entity. You'd almost prefer a dragon at this point. At least you can stab a dragon. What do you do with a forest that whispers, ask it for directions? Excuse me, potentially sentient grove of trees, could you point me towards the nearest exit? And perhaps stop making those creepy noises. You notice something else now. The plants themselves seem different. The moss on the trees looks unnaturally vibrant, a deep, almost glowing green. The ferns are larger than seems right, their fronds unfurling like massive watchful eyes. You see fungi growing in twisted, grotesque shapes on fallen logs, pulsing with faint, sickly light in the gloom. Even the leaves on the trees, normally a uniform green, seem to have veins that pulse with darker colors, like capillaries under skin. It's unsettlingly organic, like the forest isn't just a collection of plants, but a single vast, interconnected organism, and you are walking through its internal organs. You try to find a landmark, anything to orient yourself. A strangely shaped tree, a rock formation, but everything looks the same and yet subtly different. The trees seem to rearrange themselves just out of your sight. You think you remember passing a large distinctive oak with a split trunk a while back. You keep looking for it, hoping it can guide you back towards anywhere but here. But you don't see it. Or perhaps you see three different trees that could be that oak scattered in different directions, none of them quite right. It's maddening. It's like the forest is intentionally shifting its features, turning the landscape into a fluid, confusing maze just for you. This disorientation wasn't just a plot device in medieval romances. It was a very real danger. Medieval people relied on familiar routes, sun stars, and local knowledge. Deep, trackless forest offered none of that. Being lost meant being exposed to the elements, predators, and human dangers like bandits. But perhaps most terrifyingly, it meant being completely alone, cut off from human society and divine oversight in a place seen as wild, chaotic, and potentially home to things that shouldn't be encountered. The fear of getting lost was existential. It was a fear of ceasing to be in the world of men and entering a different, more primal and terrifying realm. Like accidentally ending up in the wrong queue at the DMV, but with wolves and existential dread instead of fluorescent lighting. You reach out a hand tentatively towards one of the pulsing fungi on a log. Before your fingers can touch it, it seems to recoil, the light fading slightly, the shape seeming to flatten and withdraw into the wood. You snatch your hand back, your heart pounding. It's not just static creepiness, it's active. The forest is actively reacting to you. It's not just alive, it's interactive. The whispers are closer now, more insistent. They still don't form clear words, but they sound curious, probing. Like tiny unseen mouths are breathing secrets at your ears just too softly to understand. You hear a new sound too, a soft rhythmic thumping, like a slow deep heartbeat coming from the ground beneath your feet. Thump, thump, thump. It's faint but undeniable. You are standing on something that is alive and its heart is beating beneath you. You stumble forward, needing to move, needing to escape this overwhelming sensation. The forest floor feels softer now, almost spongy, as if you're walking on living tissue. The air is thick and warm despite the deepening gloom. The sweet, earthy smell is now almost overwhelming, heavy with decay and new growth, the scent of a vast, ancient, and deeply strange organism. You are no longer just walking through a forest. You are walking inside it, and it knows you are here. And you have a horrible feeling it's just starting to decide what to do with you. That rhythmic thumping beneath your feet continues, a slow, deep pulse vibrating up through the spongy ground. It's not just a sound anymore. It's a physical sensation, like walking on a giant sleeping chest. Thump, thump, thump. Each beat feels heavy, deliberate, as if the forest itself is drawing slow, ancient breaths. The ground isn't just soft, it feels yielding. Like stepping onto damp moss, but instead of firm earth beneath, there's just more. Give more resilience. You can feel faint undulations under the soles of your boots, with each beat tiny ripples spreading out from an unseen center, like walking on a vast green waterbed made of dirt and roots. It's deeply unsettling. Every step feels like an intrusion, a weight pressed down onto something that is trying very subtly to push back. And it is pushing back. It starts small. A root previously a mere trip hazard seems to snake upwards and wrap around your ankle for a fraction of a second, before slithering back down as you pull your leg free. A low-hanging branch, which you easily ducked under moments ago, is suddenly lower, thicker, forcing you to crawl on your hands and knees through a tangle of sticky leaves and unseen webs. It feels less like encountering natural obstacles and more like the forest is deliberately adjusting itself, placing impediments in your path, a silent vegetative bouncer asking you to kindly leave. The path, which was already tenuous, seems to dissolve behind you. You glance back, expecting to see the faint trail you've been following, but it's gone. The undergrowth is already closing in. The ground seems untouched, as if you've left no trace of your passage. Or perhaps it's more active than that. Maybe the forest floor is knitting itself back together behind you, erasing your presence as soon as you pass. It's a chilling thought that the very ground you walk on is actively working against you, making sure there's no way back, no retreat. You're on a one-way trip whether you like it or not. Like trying to return a library book you definitely didn't borrow, but the librarian insists you did and is already stamping your card for the late fee. The whispers haven't stopped. They've intensified. They're no longer just at the edge of hearing. Now they seem to swirl right around your head, little eddies of sound that never resolve into words but carry a definite tone. Sometimes they sound curious, like tiny rustling sighs. Other times they are sharp or almost like agitated clicking or scraping sounds full of impatience or irritation. And then most disturbingly, there are moments when they sound seductive. A low humming murmur full of warmth and comfort, suggesting you should just stop, rest, maybe lie down on the soft, pulsating ground. That sound is the most dangerous because the urge to obey it is incredibly strong. Your body is tired, your mind is frayed, and the thought of simply giving up, of letting the forest embrace you, feels overwhelmingly tempting. You have to actively fight against it, shaking your head, forcing your legs to keep moving, telling yourself that comfort offered by a place that wants to swallow you whole is probably not the good kind of comfort. The trees are watching. You know this now with absolute certainty. Not just feeling watched, but seeing the slow, almost imperceptible turn of a gnarled knot that looks like an eye, the subtle shift in the pattern of bark that resembles a frown. And sometimes when you look away for just a second, you hear a distinct creak like old bones shifting or a heavy sigh. And when you look back, a thick branch that was previously high overhead is now lower, blocking your way, or a gap between two trees has narrowed significantly. It's like they are adjusting themselves subtly and silently to observe you better, to impede your progress. They're not static plant life. They are partners in this strange, unsettling game the forest is playing. Medieval people, despite their deep connection to the land, viewed deep, untamed forests with profound ambivalence. While forests provided vital resources, timber for building, fuel, game for food, they were also seen as places of danger where the established order of the human world frayed. Forests were often depicted as liminal spaces, borderlands between the known and the unknown, where the rules of God and man held less sway and older, wilder forces were paramount. This was a mainstream historical perspective embedded in law, like the special, often harsh laws governing royal forests and their resources, and in the popular imagination. And then there are the smells. The sweet, cloying scent from before is still there, but it's changing. It's becoming richer, heavier, mixed with other aromas that are harder to place. There's the smell of damp earth and decay, sure, but also something musky, something floral but intensely unnatural, and sometimes a fleeting whiff of something that smells vaguely like meat, like raw, wet earth mixed with the scent of a butcher's shop. It's a confusing, nauseating mix that makes the air feel thick and hard to breathe. It gets stronger near certain patches of particularly vibrant moss or glowing fungi pulsing outwards with the faint heartbeat. A quirky or fringe tidbit from medieval folklore concerns the belief that certain ancient trees, particularly oaks, could house spirits or even be manifestations of powerful nature deities. These trees were sometimes objects of veneration, and harming them was considered sacrilege, liable to bring down the wrath of the spirit within or connected to it. Stories circulated about people who cut down such trees, meeting unfortunate ends, or the trees themselves bleeding or crying out. It wasn't just abstract respect for nature, it was a belief in specific localized sentience and power within the flora. So when a branch moves to block your path, you have to wonder if it's just the wind it's not, or if you've offended a 1,000-year-old tree spirit who's decided your face looks better with a few scratches. The whispers coalesce, sometimes not into words, but into something that sounds like a single, vast intake of breath, a collective sigh that rustles every leaf around you, even when there's no wind. Or they form a low, resonant hum deep in your chest that mirrors the heartbeat from the ground. It feels like the forest is not just watching you or hindering you, but actively perceiving you, reacting to your presence, and perhaps even trying to communicate on a level far below human language. It's a communication of sensation, of pressure, of subtle shifts in the environment designed to evoke fear, confusion, or that strange, seductive urge to give in. This feeling of a forest, with its own intelligence and intent, wasn't just the stuff of fairy tales. Scholarly debate continues today on the extent to which medieval descriptions of enchanted forests, woods that actively misdirected or trapped travelers, reflected genuine belief in magical manipulation versus being allegorical warnings about the very real dangers of getting lost. The psychological toll of isolation, or even coded language about encounters with hostile human groups hiding within the wilderness. Were these travelers encountering dryads, mischievous sprites, or just very effective bandits with a knack for setting traps? The line is blurry, and the texts themselves often encourage multiple interpretations, which gives modern historians endless, fascinating things to argue about over lukewarm coffee and stale biscuits. You try to rely on the sun, but the canopy is so thick and the light so weak and diffuse that it's impossible to get any sense of direction. The gray-green twilight seems constant now, a timeless gloom that presses in on you. The air feels heavy, humid, and the sweet, earthy smell is now laced with something else, something chemical and sharp like ozone before a storm, or maybe the smell of something slowly burning underground. The heartbeat beneath you is still there, steady, relentless. Thump, thump, thump. You wonder if you're just walking on a thin layer of earth over one colossal underground organ. The physical resistance of the forest is escalating. You step into a patch of moss and your boot sinks down deep as if into thick, viscous mud. It takes a real effort to pull your leg free, the ground clinging to your leather boot with surprising suction. You leave a perfect deep imprint, but when you look back a few seconds later, the moss is already beginning to creep inwards, obscuring the shape, blurring the lines, starting to fill the void your boot created. It's not just passive mud, it's active reclaiming the space. Like trying to get away from a persistent salesperson who just keeps finding new ways to engage you, even after you've said no thank you 17 times. Branches don't just hang lower. They seem to reach out slender twigs brushing against your face, feeling like probing fingers. Thicker limbs form low, impenetrable walls just meters ahead, forcing you to detour around them only for another wall to appear on the new path you've chosen. It's like the forest is corralling you, guiding you subtly but firmly in a specific direction, though you have no idea where that direction leads. It's not just trying to make you lost. It feels like it's trying to make you go somewhere. The sounds intensify. The clicks and taps are faster now, more insistent, like 1,000 tiny tools working just out of sight. The low groans are deeper, rumbling through your bones. And the whispers, they are almost overwhelming now, a constant low murmur that feels like static in your brain, making it hard to think, hard to focus. You cover your ears trying to block them out, but they seem to penetrate everything, seeping into your mind directly. They feel cold now somehow, despite the heavy, warm air. Cold and ancient and utterly alien. You pass a fallen log covered in that glowing, pulsating fungi. As you pass, you hear a distinct wet squelch from the log, and the fungi flare brighter for a moment before dimming. It felt like you had disturbed something, or perhaps the fungi was reacting to your proximity, acknowledging your presence in a way that felt both organic and deeply wrong. It's like walking through a vast organism, and you are causing little twitches and reactions as you brush against its various parts. This concept of the forest as a physical entity capable of sensory input and reaction pushes beyond typical medieval ecological understanding. While people understood interdependence in nature, the idea of the entire wood as a single conscious reactive being was usually confined to the most extreme folklore or accounts of divine demonic intervention. It was a realm of magic and the supernatural, not natural science. So when a medieval traveler recounted a log squelching or branches reaching, it wasn't just hyperbole about natural hazards. It was often interpreted through a lens of active non-human forces at play. You notice that the air is getting warmer almost uncomfortably, so despite the deepening gloom and the lack of sunlight, the sweet earthy smell is now thick and heavy, almost suffocating, like breathing in the air of a greenhouse that hasn't been vented in years, but a greenhouse growing something very old and very strange. The ground is definitely spongier here, the heartbeat more pronounced, a heavy thump, 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 right beneath the soles of your boots. It feels wet, not with water, but with something thicker, something that oozes faintly around your steps. You force yourself to keep moving, pushing through the increasingly resistant undergrowth. Every step is a fight. The branches seem to snag your clothes with deliberate hooks. The ground tries to hold your feet. The air feels like a physical pressure, thick and heavy. The whispers are a maddening cloud around your head, and the constant low thrumming of the heartbeat is a relentless reminder that you are walking on something alive. Something vast and ancient, and now undeniably actively engaged with you. It's not just a scary forest anymore. It's an environment that has become a predator, and you are the prey slowly being herded, tested, perhaps being digested even as you walk. It's a profoundly terrifying feeling of being utterly vulnerable, surrounded by something immense and indifferent to your fate, except as it serves its own inscrutable purpose. You desperately want to find a tree that looks normal, a patch of ground that feels firm, anything that reminds you of the world you came from. But there is nothing. Just the endless, pulsating green, the heavy, strange air, and the feeling of being watched and manipulated by the very ground and trees around you. The thumping is no longer just beneath your feet. It's in your chest now, a resonant boom that syncs with your own frantic pulse, making it hard to distinguish the two. Thump, thump, thump. It feels less like walking on something vast and slow, and more like you've somehow stepped inside its ribcage, and your every movement is an irritant. The ground is alarmingly soft here, the strange, thick moisture oozing around your boots with every step, making a sickening, sucking sound. The air is heavy humid, and the smell is intense. That cloying sweetness from before is now overpowering, like rotting fruit left out in the sun, mixed with the sharp chemical tang and that unsettling hint of raw meat. It's a smell that bypasses your nose and goes straight to your gut, making you feel nauseous. You want to cover your face, but you need your hands to push through the clinging branches that seem to actively reach for you, slick with some sort of glistening sap. The forest isn't just putting obstacles in your path anymore. It feels like it's actively reshaping itself around you. Trees twist and lean their branches, weaving together ahead of you, forcing you down ever narrower corridors of pulsating green. Gaps you could have squeezed through a moment ago vanish sealed by rapidly growing vines or the unnerving shift of thick trunks. It's like being inside a slow-moving organic labyrinth, and you are being directed towards its center, whether you like it or not. There's a sense of immense power here, a raw, untamed vitality that is both terrifying and, in a twisted way, awe-inspiring. It's the power of pure growth, unchecked and perhaps even conscious. Like watching a time-lapse video of kudzu taking over a building, but it's happening in real time, and the kudzu seems to have an opinion about your presence. The strange life begins to appear more frequently. Not just fungi, but pulsating mosses that shimmer with internal light. Vines that writhe slightly even when there's no breeze, and low-lying bushes covered in flowers that pulse faintly with that same internal light, smelling like honey and something deeply unsettling like copper and ozone. There are insects here you've never seen before. Beetles the size of your fist covered in iridescent chitin that seems to absorb and warp the dim light. Flying things with multiple sets of wings that hum with an unnatural resonance. Centipedes that scuttle across the damp earth, leaving trails of faintly glowing slime. You see things out of the corner of your eye, shapes that dart between trees, blurs of movement just beyond the thick foliage. But when you turn, there's nothing there but the oppressive green. Sometimes from the depths of the wood, you hear sounds that are definitely not animal calls you recognize. Low, guttural groans that seem to vibrate through the ground. Sharp clicks like mandibles snapping, and occasionally a sound that chills you to the bone. something that sounds disturbingly like distant wordless singing, high and keening, echoing through the green twilight. The whispers are still here, of course, weaving through the other sounds, sometimes rising in intensity, sometimes receding, but always present a maddening nonverbal commentary on your journey. They feel colder here, somehow, sharper, less like curious rustling, and more like 100 tiny, sharp breaths drawn in unison. For a medieval pilgrim, encountering a place like this wouldn't just be a physical ordeal, it would be a profound spiritual test. Wilderness in the Middle Ages was often seen as a place where the veil between the earthly and the spiritual realms was thin. Deserts, mountains, and especially deep untamed forests were the traditional haunts of hermits and ascetics, precisely because they were places where you could confront not only the harsh realities of nature, but also spiritual forces, divine or demonic. A forest that seemed alive, that resisted or guided you, that housed strange and unsettling life, could be interpreted through a lens of miraculous intervention, demonic deception, or a test of faith sent by God. This perspective, where the natural world was imbued with spiritual significance and could be a battleground for the soul, was a mainstream part of medieval Christian thought, deeply influenced by biblical accounts of wilderness experiences in the lives of the saints. The path, if you can still call it that, is now barely discernible. It's more like you are being funneled, the forest walls closing in on either side, preventing deviation. The ground is incredibly soft, almost springy, like walking on a huge buried cushion. It feels warm, unnaturally warm, radiating heat up through your boots. And the thumping is relentless, filling your head, vibrating your teeth. Thump, thump, thump. Faster now, more urgent. It feels like you are approaching the heart of whatever this is, and its pulse is quickening in anticipation or perhaps agitation. A quirky or fringe tidbit from medieval belief involves the concept of the Silva, not just as a forest, but as a wild, untamed realm inhabited by creatures and forces outside of human or divine control. This wasn't just about wolves or bears. It included beliefs in wild men, wood woses, forest sprites, sometimes even relic pagan deities or demonic entities specifically tied to deep woods. These beings were often capricious or outright hostile, guarding secret places or preying on unwary travelers. Accounts of people being led astray, tormented by unseen forces, or encountering strange, non-human inhabitants were woven into local folklore, adding a layer of supernatural dread to the very real physical dangers of getting lost in a large forest. So when you hear that strange singing or see movement in the trees, a medieval pilgrim might genuinely wonder if they were stumbling into the domain of a woodwose or a mischievous forest demon, rather than just experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations brought on by exhaustion and fear. You push aside a curtain of thick, glossy leaves, sticky with sap, and step into a small clearing. The light here is different. It's still dim, filtered by the thick canopy, but there's a faint, sickly green luminescence that seems to originate from the air itself, or perhaps from the incredibly vibrant mosses and fungi covering every surface. The ground here is softest of all, almost like walking on a bed of wet sponge. The thumping is loudest here, resonating up through your entire body. In the center of the clearing is something that looks like an enormous root. It's thick as a tree trunk itself, twisted and gnarled, covered in the same pulsating moss and glowing fungi you've seen elsewhere. But here it's concentrated, pulsing with a brighter, greener light. It's partially buried in the ground, but parts of it writhe faintly like immense, slow muscles under the dirt. And the smell is overwhelming in this clearing. That rich, sweet, metallic, meaty scent is so strong, it makes you gag. You feel like you're standing inside the source of the forest's strange vitality, its very core. Around the base of the root, the ground is particularly wet and dark, almost black, and it seems to bubble faintly in places, releasing tiny puffs of steam that smell foul and acidic. This is definitely not a normal forest. This feels like stepping onto the surface of some vast alien organism that has rooted itself into the earth. Historians still argue whether the accounts of medieval pilgrims encountering bizarre phenomena in wild places were literal descriptions of perceived reality, heavily influenced by folklore and religious belief, or whether they were often allegorical narratives intended to convey spiritual lessons about temptation, perseverance, or the power of God and the devil in the natural world? Was the demon encountered in the forest a literal entity or a metaphor for the pilgrim's own doubts and fears, made manifest by the isolation and physical hardship? The blurred lines between the physical world and the spiritual realm in medieval thought make interpreting these accounts a fascinating, sometimes frustrating exercise for modern scholars. It's like trying to figure out if someone reporting a sighting of Bigfoot genuinely thinks they saw a cryptid, or if they're just telling a tall tale about a weird shadow in the woods after too much caffeine. Looking closer at the giant root in the clearing, you see that the pulsating fungi on its surface aren't just inert growths. They seem to shift and change shape like tiny bioluminescent organs. And sometimes near the base of the root, you see small dark shapes scuttling in and out of the bubbling earth. Shapes that resemble enormous glistening insects, but somehow more complex, more deliberate in their movements. They don't seem to be eating the root. They seem to be attending to it like workers maintaining some vast living machine. The air is thick with the sound of the thumping now, and the whispers are swirling around you, no longer just static, but feeling almost like they are trying to coalesce into something understandable, something significant. They feel expectant, like the forest has finally brought you where it wanted you to be, and now it's waiting to see what you'll do. That seductive hum from before returns stronger, now urging you to kneel, to touch the root, to lie down on the soft, warm, pulsating ground, and let the forest embrace you fully. It promises rest, peace, and end to your journey, but the underlying feeling is one of absorption, of being drawn in and made part of this vast, strange entity. It's the most dangerous temptation of all, because your body is screaming for respite, for an end to the fear and the exhaustion. Medieval pilgrims undertaking long journeys often face significant physical hardship: hunger, thirst, exposure, illness, and the very real threat of robbery or violence. The psychological toll of such a journey, combined with deep religious conviction, could easily lead to altered states of consciousness or interpretations of natural phenomena through a spiritual lens. A pilgrim lost, starving, and terrified in a deep wood might genuinely perceive their surroundings as hostile spiritual forces, testing their faith, or even see visions of saints or demons. The forest wasn't just trees and dirt, it was potentially a theater for cosmic struggle, and their own journey through it was part of that larger drama. It's the ultimate, it's not you, it's me, but also maybe it's God or the devil situation. You force yourself to resist the urge to lie down. This isn't peace the forest is offering, it's dissolution. You feel a sense of profound dread, but also a strange curiosity. What is this place? What is this giant root? Is this the source of the forest's sentience, the brain or heart of this vast green organism? The thumping grows faster still, almost a frantic drumming now. The whispers seem to sharpen, becoming less seductive and more insistent, carrying a tone of impatience or agitation. You've reached the core, it seems, and your presence is clearly having an effect. Whether that effect is good or bad for you remains to be seen. The smell is making your head spin, and the pulsating light from the moss and fungi seems to grow brighter, casting shifting, monstrous shadows through the clearing. You are standing at the heart of the living forest, and it feels like it's holding its breath, waiting. The thumping is no longer just a sound. It's a physical sensation vibrating through your bones, making your teeth ache and your vision blur slightly at the edges. You are standing in the heart of it, in this unnaturally lit clearing, where the air is thick and sweet and metallic, pressing down on you like a physical weight. That giant root, coiled like a sleeping serpent in the center, pulses with a faint, sickly green light that seems to reflect in the glistening sap on the leaves around you. The ground beneath your feet is soft, almost wet and warm, radiating a heat that feels distinctly biological. It's like standing on the belly of some enormous breathing creature. Thump, thump, thump. Slower now, but heavier, more deliberate, like a giant heartbeat settling into a deep, powerful rhythm. The whispers are here, too louder than before, swirling around you like phantom drafts. They aren't distinct words, not yet, but they have texture now. Rustling, hissing, murmuring, sometimes a sharp intake of breath that feels cold despite the warmth of the air. They seem to emanate from the trees themselves, from the very ground, and from the strange pulsating growths on the route. They feel less like whispers about you and more like whispers to you, trying to convey something just beyond the edge of understanding. It's the maddening sensation of being on the verge of hearing something crucial, but the sound keeps slipping away like trying to grasp smoke. You strain your ears, tilting your head, but it's no use. Just the endless, swirling, nonverbal chorus. That giant root is mesmerizing. It's not smooth. Its surface is covered in ridges and fissures, oozing a thick, dark sap in places. The pulsating fungi and mosses on it shift patterns slowly like intricate biological clocks. Sometimes you see a ripple run just beneath the surface, a subtle movement that suggests immense power contained within. It feels incredibly ancient, burdened with unimaginable age, and a deep connection to the earth. You can't help but take a step closer, drawn by a morbid curiosity, like peering into a well you know might contain something dreadful. The smell intensifies the closer you get, becoming overwhelming. That cloying sweetness mixed with the iron tang of blood and something else. Something musky and primal. It's the smell of raw, uncontained life growing and decaying simultaneously. You notice more details now. Around the base of the root, where the dark bubbling ground is wettest, there are networks of what look like thin, dark veins just under the surface, pulsing faintly with that same greenish light. Tiny, dark shapes, the ones you thought were large insects, scuttle along these veins, disappearing into the bubbling earth or emerging from small openings near the root. They move with a horrifying efficiency, like tireless automatons performing some unseen task. Are they creatures, or are they extensions of the root itself? They don't seem to acknowledge your presence, utterly focused on their ceaseless activity. It's deeply unsettling watching this miniature ecosystem of the bizarre unfolding at the foot of the giant root. It's like finding out the dust bunnies under your bed are actually performing complex maintenance on the floorboards. For a medieval pilgrim, encountering a place like this would likely be interpreted through the lens of the sacred grove or the pagan shrine. Long before Christianity became dominant, many cultures in Europe revered specific natural sites. Ancient forests, particular trees, springs, or rock formations as dwelling places of deity spirits or powerful natural forces. Even after conversion, some of these sites retained a sense of sanctity or conversely became demonized as places of pagan worship and therefore dangerous. A particularly old or large tree might be considered a world tree connection point, a place of immense power. So this giant ancient root pulsing with strange life in a clearing that feels utterly other would slot neatly into that worldview. It would be seen as a place of potent significance demanding respect, fear, or perhaps even a deliberate act of defiance or purification, depending on whether it was perceived as holy or demonic. A quirky or fringe tidbit from medieval folklore about forests involves the concept of the forest will, or the spirit of the wood. This wasn't always a benevolent dryad sort of thing. Some tales spoke of forests that could deliberately mislead travelers, shift paths to trap people, or even animate trees to block or ensnare. These weren't just natural obstacles. They were seen as manifestations of the forest's own intent. Sometimes this was attributed to specific fey creatures or localized demons, but sometimes it was described as an inherent property of the ancient woods themselves. The forest wasn't just a collection of trees. It had a corporate identity, a consciousness, and it didn't necessarily like humans. This explains why the forest seemed to guide or funnel you here. According to this folklore, it might very well have a purpose for you, and this clearing, this route, might be its focal point. Like a giant, slow-moving Venus flytrap that enjoys the scenic route before closing its trap. Historians still argue whether accounts of enchanted or malevolent forests in medieval texts and folklore reflect actual belief in conscious, harmful natural entities, or whether they are primarily symbolic narratives used to discourage people from entering dangerous wilderness areas, or even serve as cautionary tales against straying from the paths of righteousness and roads. Was the story of a traveler getting lost and tormented by the woods a literal warning about forest sprites or a metaphor for the spiritual dangers of isolation and temptation? The line between the practical dangers of nature, psychological effects of fear and solitude, and genuine spiritual or supernatural belief is incredibly difficult to draw in the medieval context. It's a bit like trying to figure out if someone's spooky camping story is about a bear, their own anxiety, or a genuine ghost, except everyone in the past was already primed to believe in ghosts and bears. As you stand there watching the minuscule, unsettling activity around the route, the thumping in your chest begins to synchronize with the pulse emanating from the ground. Your own heartbeat feels weak and frantic compared to the slow, powerful rhythm of this colossal buried thing. The whispers seem to grow more focused, clustering around you, no longer just a general hum, but feeling like 1,000 tiny voices trying to push their way into your mind. They feel demanding now, losing that initial seductive quality. They are no longer inviting you to rest. They are urging you towards something, demanding you do something. But what you look up at the canopy, thick and unbroken above you, filtering the light into that sickly green glow. The trees surrounding the clearing are different from the others you've passed. Their trunks are thicker, more gnarled, and they seem to lean inward, forming a protective circle around the root. Their branches interlock tightly like woven fingers, creating the sense of a sealed chamber. There are no signs of animal life here. No bird song, no rustling leaves from small creatures. Only the strange sounds of the forest entity itself. The thumping, the whispers, the faint bubbling, the scuttling of the dark things. It feels incredibly isolated, cut off from the rest of the world. You've stepped into a place that operates by its own rules, follows its own laws of nature, or perhaps unnatural nature. Consider the sheer scale of medieval forests, vast, largely uncharted territories that could swallow a traveler whole. Getting lost wasn't a minor inconvenience. It could be a death sentence from exposure, starvation, or predators. These weren't neatly managed woodlands. They were wild, unpredictable places where human control ended abruptly at the tree line. This physical reality undoubtedly shaped the folklore and beliefs surrounding them. A forest that confused you, turned you around, and led you deeper into its depths wasn't just a natural challenge. It was a force to be reckoned with, perhaps a malevolent one. This deep-seated cultural memory of forests as dangerous, mysterious realms would have amplified any strange sensory experiences encountered by pilgrims. Finding this pulsing, seemingly alive root in such a place, it wouldn't just be weird, it would confirm their worst fears about the untamed power lurking in the wild. It's the difference between thinking, uh-oh, I'm lost, and thinking, uh-oh, the forest is actively trying to make me its pet rock. The feeling of being watched is intense. Not just watched by unseen eyes, but observed, assessed. The entire clearing feels like a single vast sensor array processing your presence. The pulsing light from the fungi seems to brighten slightly when you shift your weight. The thumping might change rhythm subtly when you breathe deeply. The whispers feel like probing tendrils attempting to map the contours of your mind. It's an unnerving form of attention, not malicious perhaps, but utterly alien and focused. You are the foreign body in this vast living system, and the system is trying to understand you, to integrate you, or perhaps to expel you. Given the pervasive sense of dread, expulsion seems preferable, but the physical resistance to leaving is palpable. The air feels heavier near the edge of the clearing, like pushing against an invisible wall. Another aspect of medieval belief relevant here is the power of relics and holy objects. Pilgrims often carried small tokens of their faith, crosses, medals, pieces of bone or cloth from saints, for protection against both physical and spiritual dangers. In a place perceived as potentially demonic or pagan, such items would be seen as powerful deterrents. The act of making the sign of the cross, praying, or invoking the names of saints were considered effective ways to ward off evil influences or confusion caused by malevolent spirits. For a pilgrim standing here facing this bizarre pulsing root in the unsettling attention of the forest, their first instinct might be to reach for their crucifix or rosary, hoping its divine power could counteract whatever strange dark force was at work in this clearing. It's the medieval version of trying to use bug spray against a sentient continent-sized mosquito. The scholarly debate continues regarding the extent to which such beliefs influence actual behavior versus serving as literary or theological constructs. Did pilgrims genuinely believe a forest could actively try to kill them and thus take specific ritual precautions? Or were these stories primarily cautionary tales told in a deeply religious society where spiritual metaphors were commonplace? It's hard to know where genuine terror of the supernatural ended and practical warnings about nature began. Was the fear of the wood-wows a real fear of a mythical creature, or an exaggerated way to tell people to be careful of large hairy animals in the woods? As you look at the root, the thumping seems to slow even further, becoming ponderous, immense. Thump, thump, thump. The whispers coalesce for a moment, and you catch fragments, impressions rather than words. Growth, nourish, join, become. It's an invitation still, but less about rest and more about absorption. The green light from the root seems to deepen, casting long, shifting shadows that writhe like living things. The air grows warmer, almost uncomfortably so. You feel a strange pull, a magnetic force, drawing you toward the center of the clearing, towards the root. Your feet feel heavy, rooted to the soft ground, yet also compelled to move forward. It's a battle between your innate fear and this powerful ancient summons. You are standing at the altar of this living forest, and it feels like the service is about to begin. You can see the faint dark shapes scuttling more actively now, around the base of the root, appearing to gather closer to the pulsing light. Are they awaiting something? Are they preparing the way for something to emerge? The bubbling in the dark earth seems to increase, releasing tiny puffs of sickly-smelling steam. The air is thick with anticipation, a heavy, pregnant silence settling over the clearing, broken only by the immense, slow thumping and the relentless, whispering chorus that now feels less like voices and more like the sound of a vast internal process, like the churning of colossal hidden organs. You are utterly alone, yet surrounded by this immense, watchful presence, a presence that seems to emanate from the very fabric of this place. The immense, slow thumping from the root vibrates deep within your chest, a counterpoint to your own frantic heart. The air is thick, warm, and humid, pressing in on you, carrying that cloying, sweet metallic scent that makes your head feel light. But now the whispers, they are changing. No longer just a chaotic swirl of sound and feeling, they begin to coalesce, focusing with an unnerving clarity. It's not like hearing voices in your ears, but more like thoughts being placed directly into your mind, impressions, concepts forming out of the ambient noise of the clearing. Rest, join, become, nourish. These fragments from before return, but they are gaining substance, urgency. They are not just suggestions, they are demands, invitations you feel you cannot easily refuse. They feel like the thoughts of something ancient beyond comprehension, something that operates on timescales measured in centuries, not hours. The concept of you as a separate entity seems irrelevant to it, almost comical. You are simply a potential resource, a source of energy, a component that could be integrated into a larger, more complex system. It's like a colossal biological process is happening around you, and you've just been scanned as a potential nutrient packet. The whispers are the equivalent of a plant saying, "Hey, I could use some nitrogen." Except the plant is the size of a small forest, and it's talking inside your head. It's less a conversation and more a biological imperative being broadcast like a giant slow-motion digestive system, sending out tendrils looking for its next meal. As the whispers focus, the light from the root and the fungal growths seems to intensify, subtly pulsing in sync with the thumping heartbeat. It feels less like light and more like some form of energy, a visible manifestation of the life force being channeled and controlled here. You feel a strange tingling sensation in your fingertips, like static electricity, but originating from within you, not from the air. It's as if your own energy signature is being read, analyzed by the vast silent consciousness that permeates this clearing. The ground under your feet feels warmer now, almost feverish, and you notice that the small dark shapes scuttling near the root are moving with more purpose, their movements seeming to follow subtle cues from the pulsing light. They are like tiny industrious servants tending to their colossal master. The nature of the demand becoming clearer is deeply unsettling precisely because it is so alien. It's not asking for your gold or your soul in the traditional sense, or even a drop of your blood as a sacrifice. It feels more fundamental, more biological. It wants you. Not your personality, not your memories, but your physical being, your life force, your very cells. To be absorbed, integrated, to become a part of the root, the clearing, the forest itself. The whispers now carry this unmistakable intent, not with malice, but with the cold, indifferent hunger of a force of nature. Join, return, nourish the cycle, become part of the growth. It's the ultimate form of recycling, but with you as the raw material. For a medieval pilgrim, encountering something that seemed to demand their very being would be immediately interpreted through a religious lens, likely as demonic temptation or an encounter with a powerful evil spirit. The concept of nature spirits demanding tribute or interaction wasn't new. Pre-Christian beliefs often involved propitiating deities or spirits residing in specific natural locations like springs, forests, or mountains. Offering gifts, often food, drink, or small artifacts, was a way to gain favor or avoid displeasure. However, Christian teachings largely demonize these practices, portraying the entities demanding offerings as devils or malevolent forces seeking to ensnare souls. A forest entity asking for you, that would be the ultimate test of faith, a direct challenge from something perceived as deeply fundamentally evil, trying to pull you away from salvation and into some unholy union. It's like finding out your humble pilgrimage site is actually a drive-through for the forces of darkness, and you're the main course special. A quirky or fringe tidbit from medieval folklore speaks of certain ancient trees or groves where people were said to disappear without a trace, or where strange occurrences were attributed to the tree spirit or the genius loci, the spirit of the place. Sometimes these tales involve the missing person later being seen as part of the tree itself, their face in the bark, or their limbs transformed into branches. These stories could be cautionary tales about the dangers of the wilderness or metaphorical representations of being consumed by earthly desires. But some were told with a straight face, suggesting a genuine belief that powerful, ancient, natural entities could literally absorb or transform human beings who trespassed or were chosen. Imagine telling your friends you just got lost in the woods, and they're like, oh, like Gertrude, the one who's now a particularly lumpy oak. Historians still argue whether the accounts of strange disappearances or transformations in folklore reflected actual, deeply held beliefs about powerful nature, spirits absorbing people, or if they were symbolic narratives used to reinforce social boundaries, warn against the very real physical dangers of getting lost in vast forests, or serve as moral lessons against straying from communal safety and the paths of the righteous. Was the tale of the man who became part of the oak tree a literal belief in arboreal assimilation, or a dramatic way of saying, he went off into the woods and died probably? It's a tricky line to walk between genuine supernatural belief and allegorical storytelling in the medieval mindset. The whispers now feel less like a chorus and more like a single immense will focused solely on you. Yield, give, become one. The pull towards the root strengthens a subtle but undeniable force emanating from the center of the clearing. You feel a strange lethargy creeping into your limbs, a desire to simply lie down on the warm, soft earth and rest, to let whatever this has happen. It's a seductive weariness, promising an end to your journey, an end to the fear, a profound sense of belonging to something vast and ancient. It's the ultimate offer of comfort, wrapped in the terrifying package of complete dissolution of self. It's like being offered a comfy blanket that you strongly suspect might be made of spiders. Your body feels heavy, your thoughts hazy at the edges. The strange green light seems to pulse faster now, not with frantic energy, but with a deep, satisfied rhythm like a hungry creature anticipating its meal. You look down at the bubbling dark earth around the root, seeing those vein-like structures pulsing just beneath the surface, carrying that faint green glow. The dark, scuttling shapes seem to pause, their work turning their eyeless forms towards you, waiting. They are like tiny, diligent ushers preparing for the main event. They aren't threatening. They are simply expectant, waiting for you to comply with the forest request. Consider the psychological impact of prolonged exposure to sensory deprivation, combined with strange stimuli. The deep, unnatural silence of the initial forest, followed by the disorienting shifts in the path, the oppressive atmosphere, and now the intense focused sensory overload of this clearing. The pulsing light, the constant thumping, the whispers perceived internally, the sickening smell, the heat. Such conditions can induce hallucinations, paranoia, and a distorted sense of reality. For someone in a medieval mindset predisposed to believe in supernatural forces, these experiences would be interpreted as direct interactions with those forces rather than psychological responses to environmental stress. The forest isn't just messing with your head, it's attacking your very soul, trying to break your will. And honestly, after all this, a medieval therapist would probably just recommend more prayer and maybe some leeches. The whispers aren't just in your mind anymore. They feel like they are part of your mind, intertwining with your own thoughts, making it hard to distinguish between your fear and the forest's desire. It is easy. Let go. Peace. They promise oblivion, a release from the struggle, from the journey. It's a terrifyingly appealing offer, especially when you're exhausted, disoriented, and surrounded by this immense ancient presence. The pull towards the root is almost irresistible now, like a powerful current dragging you toward the center of the clearing. Your feet want to shuffle forward, your knees feel weak, wanting to buckle and drop you onto the warm, waiting earth. Another relevant historical concept is the word, or fate, and the interconnectedness of all things in certain older belief systems that persisted in folklore. The idea that humans' nature and the supernatural were not separate, but part of a single vast web. In this context, the forest entity's desire to absorb you could be seen not just as malevolence, but as a form of return or reintegration into the larger natural, supernatural system. It's a dark interpretation of ashes to ashes, dust to dust, suggesting that even during life, you are merely borrowed matter destined to be reclaimed by the ancient earth and its powers. This view makes the forest's demand less a personal attack and more a fundamental process of the world, albeit a terrifying one for an individual. It's like being told you're not just going to die and decompose, you're going to be politely but firmly repossessed by the planet's operating system. The scholarly debate here often centers on how much medieval folk belief was a coherent system versus a patchwork of localized superstitions and remnants of older practices. Did everyone genuinely believe in a complex web of wired and demanding nature spirits? Or were these stories and ideas loosely held cultural echoes, given weight primarily in the context of entertainment, moralizing, or explaining the unexplainable dangers of the wild? Was the fear of the word forest a structured theological concept, or just what you told yourself when your neighbor Agnes disappeared near the dark woods? As you fight the urge to succumb to the pull, to the seductive promise of peace and belonging, you focus on the physical details again. The dark bubbling liquid around the root base looks thicker now, almost syrupy. The small dark shapes are completely still arranged in a silent semicircle around the root, all facing you. Their stillness is more unnerving than their movement. They are waiting. The green light from the root pulses, a silent, compelling beat that seems to be tuning itself to the fading echoes of your own frantic heartbeat. The air grows heavier, tighter, the sweet metallic smell becoming almost nauseatingly intense. You can feel the forest's patience. It has waited for centuries, millennia perhaps, for the right conditions, for the right component. And now you are here. It's not going to rush. It simply exerts its influence gently, persistently, like water wearing a waystone, or like a persistent telemarketer who knows you're home. The pull towards the root is a steady, constant pressure, a biological imperative from something too vast to understand individual resistance. It wants to absorb you, to integrate you, to turn your life force and your very substance into another tiny piece of its colossal living structure. You are standing on the verge of becoming mulch, but in a way that medieval pilgrims found utterly terrifying. Okay, so the forest wants you. Specifically, it wants to turn you into human-shaped fertilizer for its creepy, glowing roots. Charming. The urge to just sink down into that warm, pulsing earth is overwhelming. It feels like every muscle in your body is screaming for release, for the heavy cloak of exhaustion to finally settle. The whispers are a constant murmuring tide in the back of your mind, like white noise that slowly, insidiously starts forming coherent suggestions. Rest. It is done. Cease the struggle. Belong. It's less a hostile attack and more like being gently but firmly absorbed by a colossal living sponge. And honestly, after walking through that ridiculously long, winding path, just lying down sounds pretty good, even if the bed is made of sentient dirt. But then a tiny flicker, A spark of something that isn't weariness, isn't the forest's placid hunger. It's you. The part of you that decided to set out on this pilgrimage in the first place. The part that faced down questionable street food and questionable embeds. It's the stubborn, survival-oriented core that refuses to just become compost. You fight back. It's not a physical fight in the sense of throwing punches. It's a struggle against an internal current. You clench your fists, digging your fingernails into your palms, trying to ground yourself in the physical reality of your body, separate from this vast, consuming presence. You take a deep breath, or try to. The air here is so thick with that sickeningly sweet smell, it feels like trying to inhale liquid sugar. The pull is like a physical force, a gentle but relentless gravity, drawing you towards the glowing root in the center of the clearing. Your feet want to shuffle forward on their own. Your knees feel weak, eager to buckle. It takes conscious, deliberate effort to simply stand still. Moving away from the root feels like trying to walk uphill through treacle, or perhaps trying to leave a really compelling buffet table when you're absolutely starving. Every inch you try to retreat feels heavy resisted by an unseen force that permeates the very air and ground. It's like the entire clearing is a giant magnet, and you are a tiny, reluctant iron filing. Panic begins to bubble up, a cold contrast to the oppressive warmth of the clearing. How did you even get in here? Where was the path? You whip your head around, scanning the edges of the clearing, trying to find a break in the dense, dark trees, a familiar twist in the undergrowth. Anything that looks like the ridiculously confusing path you followed to get here. But the tree line is uniform, a wall of ancient, silent trunks that seem to watch you without eyes. There are no obvious markers, no clear trail leading out. It's like the forest just folded itself closed behind you, leaving you stranded in its weird, pulsating heart. In the medieval mindset, facing such an overwhelming, insidious force would immediately be framed in spiritual terms. This isn't just a scary forest. This is a direct assault from the forces of evil, a demonic entity trying to claim your soul by consuming your body. Resisting it isn't just a matter of willpower, it's a matter of faith. Prayer would be your primary weapon. You would instinctively reach for any religious symbols you might carry, a cross, a relic, a worn prayer book. Chanting sacred words, reciting psalms, invoking the names of saints, known for battling demons or overcoming temptation, these would be your defenses. You'd probably be muttering Hail Marys under your breath, so fast they'd sound like a hummingbird trapped in a whisper factory. A mainstream historical fact about medieval spirituality is the immense emphasis placed on pilgrimage itself as a form of spiritual warfare and penance. Pilgrims undertook arduous journeys facing physical hardships and dangers as a way to atone for sins, demonstrate devotion, and seek divine favor. Overcoming obstacles, whether natural like harsh weather and rough terrain, or perceived supernatural threats like demons or evil spirits, was seen as part of the spiritual struggle. Your journey wasn't just a walk, it was an active fight against the forces that sought to pull you away from God and salvation. Getting absorbed by a creepy glowing root definitely counts as being pulled away from God. The whispers intensify as you resist, not louder, but more insistent, more persuasive. Why fight? There is peace here. No more journey, no more pain, just rest, eternal rest. They play on your exhaustion, on the fear of the unknown journey ahead, on the simple, undeniable weariness in your bones. It's the ultimate siren song promising an end to all your troubles if you just let go. It's like being offered a comfy blanket, a cup of hot cocoa, and an infinite Netflix queue. But you know the blanket is woven from spiders, the cocoa is poisoned, and Netflix only streams footage of your decomposition. You stumble back another step, the effort immense. The ground feels almost adhesive, trying to hold your feet in place. You scan the tree line again desperately. Maybe there's a subtle sign, a broken branch, a cluster of unusual stones, anything you might have noticed on the way in. But everything looks frustratingly, maddeningly uniform in the dim, pulsing green light. The dark shapes near the root haven't moved. They are still watching, waiting, their silent expectation adding another layer to the pressure. They are like tiny, patient creditors waiting for you to sign over your assets, which happen to be your entire biological structure. A quirky or fringe tidbit from some areas of medieval folklore involves specific rituals or items believed to offer protection against malevolent nature spirits or enchanted places. These weren't always official church practices, but localized superstitions, carrying specific herbs like rue or saint. John's wort, wearing iron charms, reciting certain rhyming incantations, sometimes nonsensical believed to confuse spirits, or even carrying a small bag of soil from your home village, were all thought to provide some defense. Imagine trying to fend off a forest that wants to eat you by waving a sprig of parsley and muttering, "Away, away, you leafy fray," probably not covered in your standard Pilgrims handbook. The air grows hotter, thicker. The thumping from the root is a steady drumbeat against your ribs, a biological timer counting down. You can feel the strength draining from your limbs, the sheer effort of resisting this passive, overwhelming pull taking its toll. It's like trying to stand upright in a swimming pool full of very thick custard that also happens to be trying to gently absorb you. You push against the invisible current, forcing your leaden feet to shuffle sideways, then back, searching for that elusive exit. Historians still argue whether these local folk magic practices were considered genuinely effective countermeasures against supernatural threats by the common people, or if they were more psychological crutches offering a sense of agency and control in a world perceived as full of uncontrollable dangers. Did a medieval peasant genuinely believe that a bit of blessed salt would repel a forest demon, or did it simply make them feel safer, allowing them to face their fears? It's hard to untangle deep-seated belief from comforting ritual in the historical record. Were they actually fighting off evil, or just performing medieval self-care? You reach the edge of the clearing, pushing against the wall of trees. The bark is rough ancient under your trembling fingers. There's no path here, no gap. It's just dense, impassable forest. You try another spot, scraping through low-hanging branches, stumbling over unseen roots, hopefully not sentient ones. Still nothing. The edges of the clearing seem to shift to subtly rearrange themselves, making it impossible to get your bearings, like trying to navigate inside a living kaleidoscope. Every direction looks the same, impenetrable, dark, and unyielding. The whispers follow you, a soft, relentless chorus in your head. Lost. There is nowhere else. Only here. Stop fighting. Rest. They are no longer just suggestions. They feel like statements of fact, hammering away at your dwindling reserves of hope and willpower. They know you're searching for an exit, and they are mocking you with the forest's perfect seamless boundary. It's the ultimate you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave situation, except instead of a hotel, it's a biome that wants to make you part of its root system. Think about the medieval concept of being led astray in the wilderness. Forests in folklore were often portrayed as liminal spaces, places where the normal rules of the world didn't apply, where one could easily get lost, not just geographically, but spiritually. To be forest-struck meant to be disoriented, bewitched, or led into danger by supernatural means. This clearing feels like the epitome of being forest-struck. Your senses are distorted, your direction is lost, and something ancient and powerful is actively preventing you from finding your way back to the known ordered world. You are not just lost, you are captured by the wild itself. You lean against a rough tree trunk, gasping for breath, your muscles screaming from the effort of constant resistance. The thumping from the root seems louder, pulsing against the bark behind you. The green light flickers, casting dancing shadows that seem to writhe and twist at the edges of your vision. The smell is overpowering now, making you lightheaded, dizzy. You slide down the trunk, collapsing onto the warm, soft earth, unable to stand any longer. The dark shapes near the root stir. They begin to scuttle towards you slowly, deliberately, their eyeless forms pointed in your direction. They are not rushing, not aggressive. They are simply approaching their assigned task. To receive the nutrient packet, to integrate the new component. The whispers in your mind swell a soft, triumphant wave. Welcome, peace, join us, belong. You are lying on the earth, unable to move the pull towards the root, immense, the small dark shapes approaching. This feels very much like the end of the line, and the line leads directly to becoming mulch. You are lying on the ground, completely spent. The earth feels warm and soft beneath you, strangely comforting, like sinking into a feather mattress after 1,000 miles on cobbled roads. The thumping from the root is the only sound that feels real, a steady heartbeat against your ear. The whispers are no longer in the background. They are filling your mind a soft, insistent choir promising release, peace, an end to all the fear and pain of the journey. Rest, join, belong. Your eyelids feel impossibly heavy, your limbs unresponsive. The small, dark shapes are closer now, indistinct in the pulsing green light, but their slow, purposeful movement is terrifyingly clear. They are coming for you, not with malice, but with the simple, unthinking hunger of earthworms turning soil. You are about to become the latest ingredient in this forest's creepy, glowing compost heap. But then, just as the first whisper of surrender touches your thoughts, something shifts. It's not a loud noise or a bright light. It's a tiny internal snap. A memory flashes through your mind. Maybe the face of a loved one back home waiting for your return. Maybe the specific reason you set out on this pilgrimage in the first place, the vow you made, the hope you carried. Whatever it is, it's a connection to the world outside this suffocating, sentient space. A world where you a person with a journey and a purpose, not just potential plant food. It's like a desperate, dying ember flaring back to life. The memory is a jolt, a splash of cold water in the face of the forest's warm, hypnotic pull. A raw, fierce refusal surges up from somewhere deep inside. No, it's not a thought you articulate. It's a feeling of pure, instinctive rejection of this placid, consuming fate. Your muscles tense, not in response to the pull, but in defiance of it. You clench your jaw, digging your fingers into the soft, yielding earth, trying to find purchase, trying to anchor yourself to something that isn't this living floor. Getting up is like fighting gravity and a very determined sloth simultaneously. Every ounce of willpower is focused on this one impossible task, lifting your heavy, leaden limbs. You push against the ground, knees, trembling arms, shaking. The pull towards the root is still strong, a magnetic force trying to keep you down, to drag you towards its pulsing center. You groan with effort, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence of the clearing. The dark shapes pause their advance as if momentarily confused by this unexpected resistance. Or maybe they're just incredibly patient. Probably patient. Slowly, agonizingly, you manage to push yourself onto your hands and knees. The earth seems to cling to your palms, reluctantly releasing its hold. You gasp for breath, the sickly sweet air burning your lungs. Your head is swimming, the green light seems to pulse in time with your racing heart. The whispers are now laced with a subtle hint of annoyance, like a parent whose child is refusing to nap. Why resist? It is useless. Surrender. But the hold feels slightly weaker now, or maybe your internal resistance has just gained a foothold. Standing is another monumental task. You brace yourself against a tree trunk, pushing up with all your might. Your legs feel like soggy noodles. The magnetic pull is still trying to drag you towards the root, bending your knees, making you sway. You have to actively fight against it, using every muscle just to remain upright. It feels like trying to stand on a deck that's slowly tilting towards a drain, and the drain is a giant, glowing root. It's less a dignified escape and more a wobbly, desperate scramble. You force yourself to turn away from the root, facing the wall of trees. The dark shapes are beginning to scuttle forward again, a bit faster this time. Okay, time to find that damn path. You stumble towards the edge of the clearing, the ground resisting your steps. You scan the tree line again, desperately searching for any sign of the confusing trail that led you here. Nothing. Just the same unbroken wall of ancient trunks and dense undergrowth, looking utterly impenetrable. It's like the forest sighed contentedly after you entered and sealed itself shut. Right, that's lunch sorted. It probably thought in its creepy tree way. But then you see it. Not a clear path, not a well-worn trail. It's a subtle break in the density, a slight thinning of the trunks, a place where the undergrowth seems ever so slightly less tangled than everywhere else. It wasn't visible when you were standing near the root, perhaps, obscured by the angle or the hypnotic light. Or perhaps, just perhaps, the forest spell relies on despair and surrender, and the moment you fought back. The illusion of being trapped began to crack just enough to reveal the almost hidden exit. It's less a grand reveal and more a faint suggestion, like finding your car keys only after you've turned the house upside down. With renewed urgency, you stumble towards this almost opening. The resistance from the clearing intensifies with every step you take away from the root. It feels like walking against a strong headwind made of molasses, The ground seems to subtly shift under your feet, trying to trip you. Branches reach out, not physically grabbing, but creating phantom obstacles, making you flinch and detour. The whispers are a frantic buzzing in your ears, now angry and urgent. No, stay, do not leave. You belong here. The air grows colder as you approach the edge of the clearing, a stark contrast to the warm, suffocating heat near the root. A mainstream historical fact about medieval forests is that they were genuinely dangerous places, far more extensive and wild than most forests today. They were home to dangerous animals like wolves, bears, and wild boars, as well as bandits and outlaws who used the dense cover to their advantage. Getting lost in a forest wasn't just an inconvenience. It could easily be a death sentence due to exposure, starvation, or encountering dangers. This practical, very real danger blended seamlessly in the medieval mind with fears of supernatural entities dwelling in these wild places, making forests terrifying liminal zones where the boundaries between the mundane and the magical felt thin. So your fear isn't just spooky forest stuff, it's rooted in a very real historical context of woodland terror. You push through the almost opening, scraping your arms against rough bark and tangled branches. The path when you are fully on it is just as confusing and winding as you remember, but outside the clearing, it feels normal. Still difficult, still easy to get lost, but without that insidious, sentient pull. The green light of the clearing fades behind you, replaced by the dappled, shifting darkness of the forest proper. The thumping heartbeat of the root is gone, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant sounds of forest creatures, hopefully not the dark shapes. They seem to have stayed in their creepy garden. A quirky or fringe tidbit relates to medieval beliefs about the forest-dwelling folk. Various spirits, fae, or even human-like creatures, like the wildmen, believed to inhabit deep woods. These beings were often seen as capricious, sometimes benevolent, but often malevolent, luring travelers astray, causing confusion or leading them into danger. Some stories suggest these beings had specific ways of trapping people, sometimes through illusions or disorientation. Your experience in the clearing where the path seemed to disappear and the very space felt enchanted and trapping fits eerily well with these folk beliefs about being ensnared by the forest folk. Maybe the glowing root was their pantry. Just a thought. You don't stop to catch your breath until you feel safely, undeniably away from that clearing. You keep moving along the confusing path, adrenaline now overriding exhaustion. Your heart is pounding, your hands are shaking, but you are moving. You are escaping. You keep looking back over your shoulder, half expecting the glowing light to reappear or the dark shapes to come scuttling after you. But the forest behind you remains dark and silent, just a regular, terrifyingly large medieval forest. Historians still argue whether accounts of encountering strange, inexplicable phenomena in the wilderness during the medieval period were genuine experiences, perhaps misinterpretations of natural events or psychological effects of stress, isolation, or if they were entirely products of folklore and superstition overlaid onto the very real dangers of the woods. When a pilgrim got lost and panicked in the forest, did they genuinely perceive a demonic force or a forest spirit trying to ensnare them? Or was that framework simply the way they understood the terrifying reality of being utterly alone and disoriented in a dangerous wild place? It's hard to separate the objective reality from the deeply held subjective belief in the historical record. Did you just have a panic attack in a confusing clearing? Or did you genuinely escape a sentient soul-eating plant entity? Depends on which historical lens you prefer, doesn't it? You keep walking the path, winding and twisting, but you don't care. It's the right kind of lost now, the kind you expected on a pilgrimage, not the trapped in a living room kind. You are breathing hard, your legs aching, but there's a surge of fierce relief mixed with the lingering terror. You escaped. You didn't become fertilizer. You pulled yourself back from the brink of becoming part of the forest's creepy, glowing furniture. That's got to be worth at least a few bonus points on your spiritual journey, right? You definitely earned your pilgrim stripes on that one. Surviving a sentient plant cult check. You keep walking the air, still thick with the memory of that pulsing light, but blessedly free of the suffocating sweet scent and that sickening pull. The path ahead of you is still a mess. Roots everywhere, branches low enough to clothesline you if you're not careful, and twists and turns that make absolutely no navigational sense. It's the kind of path that feels less like a path and more like someone spilled a box of spaghetti noodles on the forest floor and called it a trail. But it's normal. That's the key. It's just a deeply annoying, physically taxing medieval forest kind of normal, not a sentient plant cult kind of normal. Thank goodness for small mercies, right? Your legs are still shaky and every muscle screams in protest. The adrenaline that got you out of that clearing is draining away, leaving you feeling like a deflated balloon after a very intense party. You stumble a couple of times, catching yourself on rough bark, your hands scraping against mossy trunks. The forest noises start to filter back in. The distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of leaves that might be the wind, or might be something much closer and toothier, the snap of a twig somewhere off to your left. These are the familiar garden variety fears of the medieval wild, and strangely they feel comforting compared to the existential dread of being slowly absorbed by a tree. It's like swapping out a nightmare about being digested for a nightmare about being chased by a slightly disgruntled badger. Progress. You push onward, putting distance between yourself and that terrifying glade. Every instinct tells you to get as far away as possible, as fast as possible. But exhaustion is a cruel master. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, your chest feels tight, and your head is swimming, not with hypnotic whispers, but with the simple, mundane ache of dehydration and hunger. You haven't eaten or properly rested since before you entered this cursed patch of woods, and your body is staging a full-scale rebellion. Your stomach rumbles a protest that sounds louder than any forest creature. Feed me, you idiot, it seems to say, preferably something that isn't mulch. As the immediate terror of the glowing root recedes, the reality of your situation comes crashing back. You are utterly, completely lost in a vast, dangerous forest. The path you are following is a joke leading you deeper into the tangle. You have no idea which direction leads out or which way your destination lies. This isn't just about escaping a creepy plant, it's about surviving the wilderness itself. Medieval forests weren't just landscapes. They were barriers, obstacles between inhabited places. Navigating them successfully required skill, knowledge, or a hefty dose of luck. For a pilgrim, relying on poorly marked trails or local knowledge that might not exist for leagues was incredibly risky. This is the fear that underpins many pilgrimage stories. The fear of the journey itself, the physical toll, the very real possibility of never reaching your destination. You pause for a moment, leaning against a tree, trying to catch your breath. The bark is rough against your cheeks, solid and real. Not pulsating or whispering or trying to absorb you. Just bark. It's the most reassuring thing you've encountered in hours. You slide down the trunk, sinking onto the damp earth. Your legs are screaming for rest. Your back aches from the pack you're still carrying. This is the pain of the pilgrim, the weariness earned on the road. It feels strangely grounding after the surreal horror you just experienced. This pain is familiar. You signed up for this kind of suffering when you began this journey. You didn't sign up for becoming high-quality fertilizer. A mainstream historical fact about medieval pilgrimages is the sheer physical hardship involved. These were not leisurely strolls. Pilgrims often walked hundreds, even thousands of miles, carrying everything they needed. They faced unpredictable weather, disease, injury, exhaustion, and the constant threat of famine. Many never reached their destination, succumbing to the rigors of the road. The ideal pilgrim was expected to embrace this suffering as part of the penance or devotion, viewing physical pain as a way to purify the soul or emulate the suffering of Christ. So feeling utterly miserable and physically broken, congratulations, you're doing medieval pilgrimage correctly. As you sit there huddled at the base of the tree, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger and the ache in your bones, your thoughts drift back to why you started this journey in the first place. Was it a vow made in a moment of desperation, a penance for a past wrong, a fervent hope for a miracle at a sacred shrine? The reason feels distant, almost abstract after the visceral, terrifying experience in the clearing. But remembering it, holding on to that original purpose helps anchor you. It reminds you that you are not just a lost, terrified person in a forest. You are a pilgrim on a quest. This journey has a beginning and hopefully an end. It's not just aimless wandering leading to digestion. You dig into your pack hoping to find something, anything edible. A crust of hard bread, a handful of dried peas. Whatever meager provisions you started with are probably running low by now. Food spoilage was a major issue on medieval journeys, so everything was either dried, salted, or eaten quickly. There's no stopping at a handy motorway service station for a lukewarm pasty and questionable coffee. It's whatever you carried, whatever you can forage if you know how, and aren't afraid of poison or whatever you can beg. The grim reality of medieval sustenance settles in, a quirky or fringe tidbit. Some medieval travel guides or folklore offered advice on how to avoid getting lost in forests, sometimes involving simple tricks, like marking trees as you went if you had the means and weren't afraid of upsetting any resident spirits or observing the flight of birds. More superstitious advice included carrying specific amulets or reciting particular prayers believed to ward off forest-dwelling demons or misleading illusions. Given your recent experience, maybe you should have invested in a lucky rabbit's foot or a small vial of holy water, or just a better map. You chew slowly on whatever dry, tasteless thing you manage to find in your pack, washing it down with a precious, meager sip from your water skin. It's not much, but it's something. It's fuel. It's a small act of defiance against the elements and your own exhaustion. You're a person who needs food and water and shelter, not a root system. This mundane physical need reaffirms your human identity. Historians still argue whether the high rates of disappearance among medieval travelers, particularly in wild or remote areas, were primarily due to known practical dangers like banditry, wild animal attacks, or simply succumbing to exposure and exhaustion after getting lost, or if there were other less understood factors at play. Was the belief in malevolent spirits and enchanted places just a way to explain these disappearances? Or did those beliefs shape people's behavior and perception in ways that increased their vulnerability? Was the forest inherently dangerous, or did people's fear and superstition make it more so? When someone vanished in the woods, was it wolves, outlaws, or something that glowed? It's the kind of historical chicken and egg question that keeps scholars happily debating over dusty manuscripts and lukewarm coffee. You push yourself back to your feet. Resting helped, but it didn't fix anything. You're still lost, still tired, still hungry, but you are alive. You are you. The glowing root is behind you. The whispers are silent. Now you just have to deal with the slightly less terrifying but equally deadly challenge of getting out of this forest before you become wolf food or simply fade away from exhaustion. The journey continues in its more traditionally brutal medieval way. Time to try and find that trail again, or just pick a direction and hope for the best. Probably the latter. This trail is clearly messing with you. You push yourself back to your feet, the brief rest doing little more than reminding every tired muscle how truly exhausted it is. The path, if you can even call it that, is still a tangled mess, and the light filtering through the canopy seems thinner, softer perhaps, hinting at the approach of dusk or just another trick of the oppressive woods. The air is cooler now, damp with the breath of the earth, and carries the smell of decaying leaves and damp soil overlaid with that persistent, unsettling scent of the forest itself. A smell you've come to associate not just with nature, but with a kind of ancient, watchful presence. It's not just the memory of the glowing root. It's the feeling that the entire forest is holding its breath, observing your clumsy, tired progress. Every snap of a twig behind you makes you jump. Every rustle in the undergrowth sends a jolt of adrenaline through your system. Your eyes dart constantly scanning the shadows, the twisted shapes of the trees that seem to leer at you, the bushes that look suspiciously like crouching figures. This isn't just the healthy paranoia of being alone in a wild place. It's the amplified fear that comes after seeing something truly unnatural. You're no longer just worried about wolves or bandits. You're worried about the ground swallowing you whole, or the trees reaching out to pull you in, or a root glowing eerily in the dim light again. It's amazing how quickly a single bizarre encounter can redefine your entire threat assessment matrix, from avoid things with teeth to avoid literally everything, including that nice-looking daisy. You keep walking, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other, trying to ignore the exhaustion that feels like a physical weight pressing down on your shoulders. The silence between the forest sounds is almost louder than the noises themselves, a heavy, expectant hush. It's the kind of silence that makes you want to shout just to break it, but you instinctively keep quiet, afraid of drawing attention to yourself. Drawing attention from what you're not entirely sure. The forest, perhaps, or whatever else might be lurking in its depths, creatures of folklore, or just plain predators. In medieval times, forests were often seen as liminal spaces boundaries between the known ordered world of settlements and the wild, chaotic unknown. They were places where the rules were different, where the mundane gave way to the magical or the monstrous. This perception wasn't just superstition. It reflected the very real dangers and uncertainties of traversing these vast, untamed areas. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval people had a complex and often fearful relationship with deep forests. While they relied on them for resources like timber, fuel, and game, they also viewed them as dangerous, unpredictable places populated by wild animals, outlaws, and potentially supernatural entities. The dense canopy, the lack of clear paths, and the sheer scale of some forests made them easy places to get lost, to disappear, or to encounter things far outside the norm of village life. This fear was ingrained in culture, appearing in folktales, warnings, and the very structure of land use, where forests were often kept at a distance from settlements, acting as natural fortifications, but also as barriers. As you trudge on the path, it seems to get even less distinct. It sometimes forks unexpectedly, leading you to pause, trying to decipher which way looks marginally more like a trail and less like a deer run or a dead end. There are moments when the path seems to just vanish, forcing you to push through thickets or scramble over fallen logs, hoping you're still roughly heading in a direction that makes sense. It feels like the forest is actively trying to confuse you, subtly shifting and rearranging itself to keep you trapped within its leafy embrace. Or maybe you're just so utterly lost and exhausted that you can't follow a simple trail, even if it was marked with giant flashing arrows and a cheerful little sign saying, "Exit this way, please don't get eaten." Probably a bit of both, honestly. Exhaustion does wonders for your sense of direction and your grip on reality. A quirky or fringe tidbit related to medieval forests is the belief in woodwoses, or wild men of the woods. These were legendary creatures sometimes described as hairy, brutish humanoids who lived deep within the forest and were seen as embodiments of the wild, untamed nature of the woods. While often figures of folklore, they sometimes appeared in heraldry or art symbolizing the edge of civilization. Encounters with hermits or people living on the fringes of society might have fueled such legends, blurring the lines between myth and the unusual realities of the wilderness. So if you hear a rustle and see something large and hairy in the distance, it could be a bear or it could be a wild man. Either way, probably best to walk quickly in the other direction. You find yourself talking to yourself softly as you walk, muttering encouragement curses, or simply describing what you see. It's a way of keeping your mind anchored, of pushing back against the creeping sense of isolation and the feeling that you are the only human soul in this vast, indifferent, possibly malevolent expanse. Okay, big tree, don't fall on me. Just, stand there, be tree-like. Right another twist. Just keep going. Left foot, right foot. Don't look too closely at the shadows. It's the soundtrack of desperation, a quiet monologue delivered for an audience of moss ferns and whatever else is listening. Historians still argue whether medieval perceptions of forests as enchanted or dangerous places actively influenced how people navigated them, perhaps leading them to avoid certain areas or interpret natural phenomena as supernatural signs. Was the fear of the forest primarily a rational response to known dangers, predators, outlaws getting lost? Or was it heightened and shaped by deep-seated cultural beliefs in spirits, demons, and the inherent wildness of nature? Did folklore about enchanted woods make travelers more susceptible to panic, disorientation, or misjudgment, effectively making the belief in danger a source of actual danger? It's the classic loop. Did they believe the forest was dangerous because people disappeared in it? Or did people disappear in it partly because they believed it was dangerous and acted accordingly, or froze up in terror? A question to ponder, preferably from the safety of a well-lit, not at all sentient armchair. The light continues to fade, the shadows stretching and merging until the forest floor becomes a mosaic of indistinguishable dark shapes. Every step is a potential trip hazard. The air grows colder. You know with a certainty that sinks into your bones that you cannot keep going much longer. Finding shelter, or at least a place to hunker down for the night, is becoming an urgent necessity. The idea of spending the night out in the open in this forest fills you with a dread that rivals the fear of the glowing root. At least the route was a single identifiable threat. The night in this place feels like a blanket of unknown terrors just waiting to descend. The mundane danger of exposure and the terrifying possibility of other things are merging into one overwhelming threat. The chilling realization settles deep in your gut. The sun is going down and you are utterly exposed in a forest that feels less like a natural place and more like a conscious, malevolent entity. Every instinct screams at you to find cover, some semblance of safety, before the last light drains away and the true darkness descends. The air is growing colder, the dampness seeping into your clothes and chilling you to the bone. Your muscles ache protesting with every step, and your mind is a swirling mess of fear, exhaustion, and disbelief over what you saw earlier. You need to stop to rest to try and regain some energy and clarity, but stopping feels like surrendering yourself to the forest's will. Finding a suitable spot is a nightmare in itself. A clearing, too open, too visible, too exposed to whatever might be moving under the cloak of night. Dense thickets, too claustrophobic, impossible to see anything approaching, and likely crawling with unseen things. The ground is uneven, littered with roots, hopefully not the glowing kind, fallen branches and hidden rocks. Every potential spot seems wrong. A large inviting hollow beneath a tree, probably damp, maybe a den for some animal, or worse, a place where weird energy collects. A flat, open space feels like a stage waiting for something unsettling to make its entrance. You stumble on scanning the oppressive woods, your desperation growing with each passing moment as the light fails. The shadows are no longer just lack of light. They are solid breathing things, shifting and deepening, making familiar shapes look monstrous. You finally spot something that looks marginally better than just collapsing onto the forest floor. It's a small rocky outcrop, not a full cave, but it creates a shallow overhang, perhaps offering a little protection from potential rain or dew, and maybe making you slightly less visible from a distance. The ground beneath the overhang is relatively flat and clear of debris, probably because nothing much grows there. It's not exactly a five-star hotel or even a one-star inn smelling faintly of stale beer and sweaty pilgrims, but it's something. It feels slightly less vulnerable than being completely in the open, though the feeling of being watched persists, a prickling sensation on the back of your neck that no amount of rubbing seems to alleviate. You briefly consider trying to make a fire, but the risks outweigh the benefits. A fire is a beacon announcing your presence to everything in the forest, known and unknown. In this place, discretion feels like the better part of survival. So no cozy campfire stories tonight, just you and the encroaching darkness. You sink down onto the cold, hard ground beneath the overhang, leaning back against the rough stone. It's far from comfortable, but the sheer physical relief of stopping for a moment is immense. You try to arrange your worn cloak around you for warmth, pulling your knees up to your chest. Every muscle screams in protest, every joint aches. Your feet feel like bruised lumps. You close your eyes for a second, just a second, craving rest. But the moment you do, the image of the glowing root flashes behind your eyelids, stark and unsettling. Sleep feels impossible, a luxury you can't afford. Your senses remain on high alert, straining to interpret the sounds of the forest settling in for the night. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers truly understood the specific dangers of different forest types or simply viewed all large wild woodlands with general suspicion. Did they possess practical knowledge about animal behavior, poisonous plants and weather patterns passed down through generations? Or was their approach to wilderness survival primarily guided by folklore, religious beliefs, and fear of the unknown? Some scholars suggest that while practical skills were certainly necessary for anyone venturing outside settled areas, these skills were often interwoven with superstitious practices and beliefs about malevolent forest spirits or curses. For example, carrying certain herbs or saying specific prayers might have been considered as important for safety as knowing how to find potable water or build a basic shelter. The forest sounds change subtly as the last vestige of twilight fades. The chirping of birds ceases, replaced by a different chorus. Rustles that could be small animals foraging or something larger moving stealthily. The hooting of owls, which in some medieval beliefs were seen as ill omens or associated with witches. The creak and groan of trees in the breeze, sounds that in the dim light can easily sound like whispers or distant footsteps. You find yourself holding your breath, listening intently, trying to distinguish natural sounds from unnatural ones. Is that a twig snapping nearby or just the wind? Was that a low growl or just your stomach protesting its lack of sustenance? Your imagination, already frayed by exhaustion and fear, is working overtime, turning every ambiguous sound into a potential threat. It's amazing how the absence of light amplifies every other sense, especially the sense of impending doom. A quirky or fringe tidbit from medieval lore concerns beliefs about specific types of trees holding power or being inhabited by spirits. Certain ancient oaks, for instance, were sometimes considered sacred or dangerous places after dark. Travelers might avoid sheltering under or even passing too close to such trees, fearing they might awaken or anger the entity residing within. There were also superstitions about trees struck by lightning being cursed or having a unique, often negative energy. So when you were searching for shelter subconsciously, you might have been avoiding that massive gnarled oak with the strange growth on its side, or the lightning split pine based on instincts honed by generations of folklore and cautious tales. Or maybe you just thought they looked creepy, probably a bit of both. You try to make yourself as small and inconspicuous as possible under the rock overhang. Pulling your cloak tighter, you lean your head back against the cold stone, trying to find a comfortable position that doesn't exist. Every shift of weight sends a jolt of pain through weary muscles. Your mind, despite the fatigue, refuses to quiet down. It keeps replaying the image of that glowing root, that unnatural light pulsing with a life that felt both ancient and alien. What was? Was it a sign, a warning, or just something the forest does? The lack of understanding is almost as terrifying as the sight itself. In a world where the lines between the natural and the supernatural were often blurred, an unexplained phenomenon in a deeply unsettling place like this forest could easily be interpreted as a sign of malevolent magic or divine displeasure. The darkness outside your small haven deepens to an absolute blackness, broken only by the faint, distant glimmer of stars filtering through the dense canopy overhead. The air grows heavy, thick, with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and that indefinable forest smell that now seems laced with something metallic and cold like fear. You shiver, partly from the cold, partly from the ever-present anxiety. You keep your eyes open, staring out into the impenetrable gloom, trying to discern shapes or movements, though you know it's futile. Your eyes quickly adapt, seeing only deeper shades of black, with phantom shapes flickering at the edge of your vision. It's the kind of darkness that presses in on you, feeling almost solid, suffocating. A mainstream historical fact about medieval night travel is that it was generally avoided whenever possible due to the increased dangers. Travelers were much more vulnerable to attacks from bandits, wild animals, and simply getting lost in the darkness. If forced to travel at night, it was usually only done on well-known roads between nearby settlements, often by groups carrying torches. Venturing off-path into a deep forest after dark, as you have essentially been forced to do, was considered extremely risky and often seen as an act of desperation or folly. Pilgrims in particular were advised to complete their daily journeys before sunset and seek shelter in monasteries, hostels, or friendly villages along their route. Your current situation is pretty much the textbook definition of what not to do, according to any medieval travel guide. Assuming such a guide wouldn't immediately burst into flames upon entering this forest. The silence isn't truly silent. It's filled with tiny noises amplified by the lack of light and your heightened senses. The scurrying of unseen creatures in the undergrowth, the drip of water somewhere nearby, the soft thump of a decaying fruit falling from a tree. Each sound is a pinprick on your raw nerves. You try to focus on your breathing, slow and steady, a technique you dimly recall from some long-forgotten moment of calm. It helps a little, but the fear is a constant background hum, a low vibration in your chest. You shift again, trying to ease the ache in your back, the numbness in your legs. This rock is not your friend. It's like trying to sleep on a pile of slightly less uncomfortable rocks. You pull your knees tighter to your chest, trying to conserve warmth. The temperature has dropped significantly since the sun went down. The dampness from the forest floor seems to cling to everything. You feel utterly exposed despite the minimal shelter of the overhang. It's like the rock only hides you from the sky, leaving you fully open to whatever might be crawling or creeping along the ground. or whatever might be watching from the trees above. You find yourself tensing up at every faint sound, ready to spring up, ready to run though. Running into the impenetrable darkness of the forest feels like a suicidal option. Better the known evil of staying put than the unknown horrors lurking out there. Though after seeing the glowing root, the line between known and unknown evil feels extremely blurry. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers' accounts of encountering strange or terrifying phenomena in forests were literal descriptions of unusual natural events like phosphorescent fungi, unusual animal behavior, or geological oddities, misinterpreted through a lens of superstition, or whether they were embellished or entirely fabricated to explain dangers or add drama to their journeys. Were the stories of woodwosses or cursed places based on misidentified animals, encounters with reclusive hermits, or simply imaginative fear? The truth is likely a complex mix with genuine dangers, amplified by cultural beliefs and the psychological effects of fear and exhaustion in a wild, unknown environment. So when you recount this later, assuming you survive, which, let's be honest, is still very much up for debate, will people believe you saw a glowing root, or will they just assume you were tired, scared, and saw marsh gas or some weird moss? You close your eyes again, forcing yourself to try and rest. Just a few minutes, just enough to take the edge off the exhaustion. You lean your head against the cold stone, try to relax your shoulders, your neck. But the forest presses in a palpable presence outside your tiny pocket of quasi-safety. You can feel it watching you, a vast ancient awareness that is indifferent at best, actively hostile at worst. The sounds seem to shift, becoming less like individual animal noises and more like a low murmur. A collective breathing, a heartbeat that is synchronized with the creaking of the branches and the sigh of the wind. It's a sound that feels deeply wrong, a sound that vibrates in your bones and makes your teeth ache. This isn't rest. This is simply enduring, waiting for the night to pass, hoping that whatever the forest holds decides to leave you undisturbed. The glowing root feels like a distant memory, now replaced by the overwhelming reality of the dark, cold, watchful woods surrounding you. Sleep, you realize, is a distant dream. You are a creature of the day, exposed and vulnerable in a world that belongs to the night and to something else entirely. The feeling of being watched is like a physical weight now pressing in on you from all sides. But it's the sounds or lack thereof that truly begin to fray your nerves. The unnatural silence you first noticed is gone, replaced by something far more insidious. It's not noisy, not in the way a marketplace or a stormy sea is noisy. It's a soundscape of unsettling subtleties, a symphony of things that shouldn't be there, or sounds that are just wrong. You strain your ears trying to decipher the whispers that seem to coil around the tree trunks. They're not quite words, not human language, but they have a cadency, a rise and fall, that suggests meaning. It sounds like dry leaves skittering across stone, except there's no stone here, just soft earth and deep leaf litter. Or perhaps it's like faint voices, speaking just out of earshot, the kind you can almost make out but never quite grasp. Is it the wind, but the air is still? Is it small animals you've seen none since you entered, and these sounds don't sound like scurrying paws or chirps? They sound older, deeper, like the forest itself is sighing or muttering secrets you aren't meant to hear. A scrape, soft, deliberate, like something dragging itself slowly over rough bark high up in the branches. You can't see clearly through the gloom. You freeze listening. It stops. Then moments later, it starts again from a different direction entirely. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Is it a predator? A large snake, but it sounds too measured, too intentional. It's the sound of patience, of something taking its time. You find yourself glancing upwards, scanning the tangled canopy, but there's nothing visible but the dense weave of branches and leaves against the weak filtered light. You might try calling out a tentative hello, perhaps, but the word feels alien and small, swallowed instantly by the oppressive quiet that rushes back in when the scraping stops. It's like dropping a pebble into a bottomless well. Then there are the creaks. The wood around you seems to be alive with them. Not just the natural groans of ancient trees settling or swaying in the wind. Again, there is no wind here on the forest floor, but sharp, sudden cracks and pops that sound like footsteps, heavy ones. You spin around, heart hammering against your ribs, expecting to see something, but there's never anything there. just the silent, watchful trees. It feels like the forest is walking around. You just beyond the veil of your sight, pacing your progress, keeping you penned in. You might take a tentative step forward, and a creak answers from behind you. You pause, and a twig snaps sharply off to your left. It's a dialogue you don't understand, a conversation the forest is having with you as the silent, unwelcome subject. Mainstream historical accounts from the medieval period often describe travelers being highly attuned to sounds in the wilderness, viewing them as critical indicators of danger. The rustling of leaves could mean an approaching animal or bandit, the snap of a twig, the presence of something hidden. This hyper-vigilance was a survival skill, but in this forest, these sounds are divorced from recognizable sources, making the usual survival instincts useless and amplifying fear. It's like your brain is screaming, "Interpret this," but the signals are gibberish. The weirdest sounds are the ones that aren't really sounds at all, but impressions. You might feel a low hum vibrate through the ground beneath your feet, more felt than heard, like the deep thrum of some vast sleeping creature. Or you might catch the sensation of rushing water, distant and fleeting, even though you haven't seen or heard a stream since you entered. These ephemeral auditory hallucinations, or are they add another layer of doubt to your already strained mind? Are you hearing things, or is the forest deliberately messing with you? It's like the world's worst scavenger hunt, but instead of finding things, you're just losing your mind. A quirky historical tidbit is the belief in specific types of malicious forest sounds, such as the whispers associated with certain kinds of spirits, or the mimicking calls of creatures like the woodwoos or wild man, who were said to lure people astray. Certain sounds were also linked to specific omens. The hoot of an owl at night was one thing, but an unnatural, mournful wail echoing from deep within the woods in broad daylight. That was universally bad news. This forest seems to be generating its own unique and deeply unsettling set of sonic signals. The cumulative effect of these sounds, the almost whispers, the phantom scrapes, the mimicking creaks, the felt vibrations, is profoundly disorienting. It's not just fear, it's a deep-seated unease that settles into your bones. You start to doubt your own senses. Did you really hear that, or was it just your imagination playing tricks in the oppressive silence and gloom? The feeling of being watched intensifies, as if the sounds are the forest's way of commenting on your presence, or perhaps directing unseen eyes towards you. It feels like the forest is actively trying to break your composure, to wear you down, to make you make a mistake. Historians still argue whether medieval accounts of forests generating unnatural sounds were purely folklore, based on misinterpretations of natural phenomena amplified by fear and superstition, or if there's a forgotten element of psychological stress induced by dense, isolating environments that was simply described in supernatural terms. Maybe the sound of your own blood rushing in your ears after hours of strained listening was enough to convince you the trees were whispering. Hard to say without being there, knee-deep in questionable foliage. You try to focus on the physical task of moving forward, pushing aside branches, navigating the uneven ground. But every step is a battle against not just the terrain, but the constant barrage of unsettling auditory input. You might hum a tune under your breath to try and drown out the whispers, but your voice feels weak and quickly trails off, unable to compete with the sheer presence of the forest's quiet power. It feels like even your own thoughts are being listened to, judged by this vast ancient entity you are currently trespassing within. The air feels even colder now, carrying that strange, sweet decay scent more strongly. It seems to cling to you, getting into your clothes, your hair. It's a smell that feels intrinsically linked to the sounds, ancient, organic, and subtly wrong. The light is barely a memory, the canopy overhead a dense, impenetrable barrier. You are utterly immersed in the forest now, and it is making its presence known, not with roars or attacks, but with a persistent psychological pressure delivered through sound and silence and the feeling of unseen eyes. You might stumble over a root, catching yourself just before you fall. The sudden disturbance feels jarringly loud in the otherwise controlled soundscape of the forest. It's as if you've struck a wrong note in a careful composition, and the forest holds its breath, waiting for your next move. You hold yours too, listening intently for any response, any shift in the symphony of subtle sounds. All you hear is your own ragged breathing and the frantic beating of your heart. For a moment, it feels like everything is waiting for you. Waiting for what? This slow burn horror, this constant state of low-level anxiety induced by ambiguous sensory input, is somehow worse than facing a clear threat. A bear roars, you run. A bandit shouts, you fight or surrender. But what do you do when the threat is the forest itself communicating with you through whispers you can't understand and footsteps you can't see? It's like being gaslit by nature. Did you hear that while you asked the trees? The trees don't answer, but a branch creaks somewhere behind you, and you could swear you hear the faintest, driest chuckle carried on the still air. Must be losing it. Or maybe just really tired. Yeah, let's go with tired. You push on, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Each snap of a twig under your boot feels like a violation of the forest's deliberate quiet. Each time you push through a thicket of leaves, the rustle seems disproportionately loud. The sounds of your own movement are the only familiar things in this alien auditory landscape, and they serve only to highlight how out of place you are. You are a clumsy, noisy intruder in a world that moves and speaks in hushed, ancient tones. And it feels like it's getting ready to deal with the intruder. The feeling of being watched intensifies, and now subtly you start to feel like the sounds are guiding you. Not towards the path which is long gone, but deeper in. That faint scrape seems to be just ahead of you. The whispering rustle draws your attention off to the left, deeper into the denser wood. Are you being lured, or is your mind simply imposing directionality on random noise out of a desperate need for structure? You don't know, and the not knowing is the worst part. The sounds are closing in, or maybe you are simply moving deeper into their source. Either way, you are now fully within the soundscape of the living forest, and it sounds deeply, deeply unsettling. The sensation of being subtly guided deeper, drawn by those almost sounds, becomes more concrete now. It's not just auditory, it's a feeling in the air. A pull you can sense, almost like a low magnetic force, nudging you forward, away from the memory of the trail and towards the forest's heart. You find yourself veering without conscious decision, following the faintest hint of that phantom scrape, or the direction the whispers seem strongest. It feels less like you are walking through the forest, and more like the forest is directing your steps. And it is making the journey incredibly difficult. The physical resistance of the woods intensifies dramatically. It's no longer just navigating thickets and uneven ground. The branches that were merely obstacles before now seem actively hostile. As you try to push past, they spring back with surprising force, slapping against your face or catching your clothes. Twigs that you step over seem to snag your ankles deliberately. Roots slick with ancient moss twist underfoot with malicious intent, eager to send you sprawling. It's as if the very fabric of the forest is tightening around you, resisting your passage, making you fight for every single inch gained. Remember those annoying little branches that slap you in the face when you're walking through the woods? Imagine those are now sentient and really don't like you. The ground beneath your feet becomes increasingly treacherous. It's not just roots. Patches of earth feel unnaturally soft, threatening to swallow your foot, while others are hard as stone where they shouldn't be. You might step onto what looks like solid ground, only for it to feel like you're walking on a trampoline, the earth shifting and swaying beneath you. Then just as suddenly, the ground will feel unnervingly stable, even uphill slopes, presenting no resistance for a few steps before returning to a brutal incline. It's disorienting, messing with your balance, and forcing you to constantly watch your feet, taking your attention away from the looming trees and that pervasive feeling of being observed. It's like walking on a treadmill designed by a mischievous deity who keeps randomly changing the speed and incline just to mess with you. The paths already long lost refuse to stay lost in a simple way. Instead, they seem to reappear fleetingly, glimpses of clearer ground or a more defined track, only to vanish around the next bend or simply fade back into impassable undergrowth as you approach. You might follow what looks like a promising deer trail, hoping it will lead somewhere, anywhere, only to find it abruptly ends at an impenetrable wall of thorns and tangled branches, thicker and more hostile than anything you've encountered so far. Turn back, and the trail you just followed is gone. It's as if the forest is laying out false trails, illusions of progress, only to snatch them away, herding you deeper into its maze. Trying to use breadcrumbs wouldn't work. They'd probably just disappear, or perhaps grow into tiny, aggressive, sentient fungi that scold you for littering. The physical atmosphere changes too. The air grows heavier, colder, the light filtering through the canopy, dimmer tinged with an unnatural green or gray. In some spots, the air feels thick, humid, almost difficult to breathe, as if you've stepped into a pocket of stagnant, ancient breath. In others, it's unnervingly thin and cold, raising goosebumps despite the exertion of pushing through the dense undergrowth. These localized atmospheric shifts aren't tied to elevation or obvious features. They just are another unsettling layer of the forest's control over its environment. It's like walking through a house where someone keeps messing with the thermostat, but instead of comfort, they're aiming for maximum dread. Historians know that medieval travelers relied heavily on natural cues for navigation. The direction of the sun, the flow of streams, the moss on trees. They understood the environment was full of potential dangers and challenges, but they also saw it as a system governed by understandable, even if sometimes unpredictable rules. Losing the trail was a known risk, but the idea of the environment actively working against you, bending pathways, and altering conditions not by chance, but by intent moves beyond natural challenge into the realm of the supernatural or deeply unsettling. The forest isn't just indifferent, it feels aware. The trees themselves seem more imposing now. Their bark, previously just textured surfaces, takes on a quality that feels almost like skin. Ancient, gnarled, sometimes unnervingly smooth. You might find yourself instinctively avoiding touching them, a primal unease suggesting they might react. The branches overhead seem lower, heavier, pressing down, limiting your view of the sky and reinforcing the sense of enclosure. Some trees appear to lean at impossible angles, creating distorted claustrophobic tunnels you have to squeeze through, while others seem to stand unnaturally close together, forming barriers that force you to detour. A quirky historical tidbit about forests and folklore is the concept of the woodwife, or moss folk spirits deeply tied to the woods who could mislead travelers, make paths disappear, or cause sudden, inexplicable weather changes within their domain. They weren't necessarily evil, but they were possessive and often wary of human intrusion, using their connection to the forest to deter or confuse trespassers. This forest feels like it has its own version of moss folk, but instead of a single spirit, it feels like the entire ecosystem is acting with a unified, subtle will. You might reach out to push aside a branch only for it to seem to pull away, just as you touch it or swing back unexpectedly hard. It's tiny, almost imperceptible actions, but cumulatively, they build a terrifying picture. The forest is responsive. It feels your presence reacts to your movements. The roots that trip you don't just happen to be there. They seem to rise up slightly as you approach. The branches that bar your way weren't always so dense. They seem to have woven themselves tighter just moments before you reach them. It's passive-aggressive nature at its finest. Oh, sorry, did you want to go this way? Too bad I just grew a wall of thorns here. My bad. The feeling of physical hindrance isn't constant. It comes in waves. There might be moments where you move relatively smoothly, a few steps forward, feeling almost easy, offering a flicker of false hope. Then with no warning, the resistance returns stronger than before, the ground shifting the branches, grabbing the air, thickening. It's psychological torture, a pattern of challenge and fleeting relief that keeps you off balance, eroding your resolve and your physical strength. Your muscles ache, your lungs burn, but the exhaustion isn't just from the physical effort. It's from the constant nagging fight against an environment that seems determined to wear you down. Historians still argue whether accounts of forests being malevolent or alive were purely symbolic, reflecting the very real dangers and psychological effects of getting lost in vast, untamed wilderness, or if there were specific, now forgotten, natural phenomena like weird geological formations, strange wind patterns, or even psychoactive plants affecting perception that contributed to these beliefs. Perhaps the feeling of the ground shifting was just a minor tremor amplified by fear, or the branches moving were just wind that you couldn't feel but that affected the trees overhead. Or maybe the old stories weren't entirely metaphors. Hard to say when you're trying to pry apart two branches that seem determined to stay fused together. You might lean against a tree for a moment, needing to catch your breath and feel a strange vibration pass through the bark, a faint tremor that isn't your own shaking hands. It feels like the tree is sighing, or perhaps shifting its weight. The sheer size and age of some of these trees become overwhelming. They feel less like individual plants and more like ancient, slow-moving pillars of a conscious organic entity. You get the distinct impression that if they wanted to, they could simply grow around you, absorbing you into their wooden moss over centuries, and there would be absolutely nothing you could do about it. Not exactly a comforting thought when you're already feeling like a fly caught in a very slow-moving spiderweb. The sounds from the previous section haven't stopped. They are still there, the whispers and creaks, but they are now interwoven with the physical resistance. The snap of a twig underfoot is answered by a sharp crack from overhead. A branch slaps your face, and you hear that dry, rustling chuckle again, closer this time. The forest isn't just observing and guiding with sound, it's physically responding to your presence, to your struggle. It's a feedback loop of increasing unease and physical difficulty each step forward, met with a subtle physical pushback. The scent of sweet decay seems stronger now too, carried on those strange pockets of heavy air. It feels like the breath of the forest itself, an exhalation of decomposition and ancient growth that is both cloying and strangely invigorating. It's the smell of things ending and beginning all at once, a cycle you feel increasingly drawn into, or perhaps trapped within. You are no longer just walking in the forest. You are becoming part of its physical experience, subject to its bizarre rules and resistant textures. You try to focus to find some pattern in the physical resistance, some way to anticipate where the ground will sink or a branch will spring back. But there is no pattern. It is chaotic, unpredictable, designed not just to hinder, but to confuse and exhaust. Every physical interaction with the forest reinforces the idea that you are not welcome, that your presence is an irritation. The forest is slowly, methodically working to extinguish or perhaps absorb. You feel yourself getting slower, more hesitant, each movement a conscious effort against an unseen pervasive force. The living forest is making its physical presence undeniable, and it feels like it's just getting started. You push through another wall of grabbing branches, stumble over another seemingly intent root. The fight feeling less like progress and more like treading water against a slow, inevitable current. The sounds are louder now too, not just whispers and creaks, but something resonant. A deep hum that vibrates in your chest, a low thrumming, like enormous heartbeats buried deep underground, accompanied by the distinct sound of massive unseen things shifting nearby. It's not just the branches slapping or the roots tripping, it's the forest itself, making noise, a symphony of organic creaks, pops, groans, and that unsettling dry rustle that feels like laughter. You feel it calling you now directly. Not with words, but with that magnetic pull, that sense of being drawn, intensified to a degree that feels almost physical, like a rope tied around your waist, gently but firmly tugging you forward. It guides you towards a point where the sounds are loudest, the resistance is strangely paradoxical. Moments of impossible ease, followed by bursts of brutal tangled chaos. It's testing you, playing with you perhaps, or just directing you with the same unthinking powerful force a river directs a twig. You are definitely the twig in this scenario. Finally, you arrive at a place that feels like the center. It's not a clearing in the traditional sense. The trees are still dense, but they stand differently here. Older, impossibly large, their trunks thicker than small cottages, their canopies so high they seem to touch a sky you can barely see. The air here is thickest, richest, with that scent of decay and growth almost intoxicating. The hum is strongest, vibrating through the ground and up your legs. And the shifting sounds, they are all around you now, not distant, but close, intimate. It feels like the entire stand of ancient trees is slowly, imperceptibly breathing. You reach out a trembling hand toward the nearest massive trunk, its bark a chaotic landscape of moss lichen and deep ancient furrows. As your fingertips brush the surface, you feel it. Not just the texture of bark, but a faint internal tremor, a slow pulse. And then through that touch, a flood of sensation and impression hits you. It's not thoughts, not language you can understand, but a feeling of immense ancient consciousness. A being that perceives time not in minutes or hours, but in centuries and millennia. A being that is the forest, and the forest is it. It feels patient, infinitely patient. Your presence is noted, acknowledged, but not necessarily welcomed or rejected in a human sense. It's more like a temporary ripple on a vast, deep lake. Annoying perhaps if you are too disruptive, hence the physical resistance to lost paths, but ultimately insignificant on its timescale. You are a fleeting moment in its long, slow existence. Like a particularly annoying gnat buzzing around a mountain, the mountain notices might even try to swat you away if you land in its eye, but it doesn't dwell on it. This feeling of ancient consciousness is overwhelming. It's a sense of deep roots connecting to vast unseen networks of slow, deliberate growth of absorbing sunlight and rain and the very minerals of the earth over countless generations. You feel the interconnectedness of everything here. The mycelial networks underground acting like a fungal internet, the constant, slow chemical communication between trees, the silent understanding between the plants, the soil, the air, and whatever spirit animates it all. It's a complex living system, and you are a foreign body introduced into it. Medieval accounts of forests sometimes spoke of them as places ruled by spirits or gods where the veil between the mortal and the mystical was thin. These were places of pilgrimage, yes, but also places of danger where one might encounter fey creatures, wood elementals, or even ancient deities tied to the land. While the pilgrims sought connection to the divine through nature, the deeper, older beliefs often saw nature as divine sentient in ways humans could barely comprehend. This forest feels like a direct connection to that older, more profound sense of the sacredness and sentience of the natural world. It's not just a collection of trees, it's a single colossal entity with many parts. A quirky historical tidbit is the belief in tree spirits, or dryads found in various European mythologies. These weren't just abstract concepts. Sometimes people would leave offerings to specific trees, ask for blessings, or avoid cutting certain ancient woods for fear of offending the spirit within. The idea that a forest could be a collective of these spirits, or perhaps an overarching entity composed of them all, fits with the feeling you are getting now. It's like you've stumbled into the central nervous system of a slumbering giant made of wood and leaf, and you're probably stepping on a nerve or two. You try to understand more, to reach out further with your mind to make sense of the faint impressions flooding your senses. Is it aware of your purpose? Does it know you were seeking something specific? The answer is unclear, or perhaps the concept of purpose or seeking doesn't translate to its ancient consciousness. It perceives presence, intention to move through its space disruption. Your struggle against its physical resistance might even be perceived as amusing or simply another natural process unfolding within its borders, like a beetle trying to climb a rock. Historians still argue whether the descriptions of places like this forest in medieval texts were literal accounts of perceived phenomena, symbolic representations of spiritual journeys and inner struggles, or cautionary tales exaggerated over time to keep people away from dangerous wilderness. Were these forests genuinely believed to be sentient entities, or was it a way to describe the psychological terror and disorientation of being completely lost and at the mercy of the elements? Was it mass hysteria, shared cultural belief, or something genuinely inexplicable interacting with human perception? It's hard to say definitively, especially when you're standing here feeling the ground pulse beneath your feet. The sounds shift again. The thrumming deepens, and the rustling sounds seem to coalesce into something resembling a sigh, or perhaps a slow exhalation. The branches overhead, previously dense and pressing down, seem to lift slightly, allowing a sliver of light you haven't seen in ages to penetrate the gloom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the heavy air. It feels like an acknowledgement, a slow, deliberate breath taken because you are here in its heart. You feel a sense of permission, or maybe just observation without active malice. The intense physical resistance seems to lessen slightly in this central space. The air feels less actively hostile, though still heavy with that ancient scent. It's as if the forest exerted itself to guide, herd, resist you to this point. And now that you are here, it is simply waiting, observing. You are under its gaze within its core, and your fate feels entirely dependent on its ancient, unknowable mood. Which is a slightly terrifying thought, like waiting for a giant sloth to decide if it wants to eat you or just move very slowly away. You look around at the immense trees, feeling the power radiating from them, the sense of deep time embedded in their very structure. These are not just plants. They are the slow-motion architecture of a conscious being. Their roots are its nervous system, the sap its blood, the rustling leaves its murmuring thoughts or breaths. You came seeking a place mentioned in history, a legend, a forest sworn to be alive. And here you are standing undeniably within it, feeling its pulse, sensing its ancient, quiet awareness. The legend is real. What does it want? Does it want you to leave to stay? To become part of it like the countless layers of leaf litter and fallen branches that feed its growth? There is no answer that makes sense in human terms. Its desires, if it has them, are probably as slow and incomprehensible as its growth. Maybe it simply wants to be left in peace, its deep slumber undisturbed by the fleeting noisy creatures that scurry across its surface for a brief flicker of time. Your journey here feels less like a successful quest and more like a momentary intrusion. You slowly take a step back from the pulsating tree trunk. The feeling of connection lessens, but the awareness of the forest's sentience doesn't fade. It's everywhere now, in the air, the ground, the sounds. You know with absolute certainty that this is no ordinary forest. It lives, it breathes, and it is watching you. Getting here felt like overcoming immense odds, fighting the very will of the woods. Leaving might prove to be even harder. You have reached the heart of the legend, and the heart is very much awake. You take another step back then, another slowly turning, looking for any sign of a way out, any direction that doesn't feel like pushing against an ancient will. The sounds continue, the hum deepens, the rustling persists. The ancient trees stand silent sentinels, their presence overwhelming. You came seeking something from the past, a curiosity, a tale. You found something far older, far more powerful, and utterly, undeniably alive. And it knows you're here. All right, the journey through the forest is complete. You made it to the heart of the legend, felt the pulse of the ancient woods, and hopefully you're feeling just the right amount of sleepy dread. The mystery of the living forest remains perhaps, but its reality for the medieval pilgrims and for you tonight is clear. Now let the imagery of those colossal, slow-breathing trees gently fade from your mind. The hum you felt in the story isn't real. It's just the sound of your own quiet room, maybe the fan you turned on earlier, or perhaps just the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Allow the feeling of fighting through tangled branches and shifting ground to dissolve, leaving only the comfortable weight of your blankets. The scent of damp earth and ancient decay is replaced by the clean, familiar air around you. There's no longer a pull or a guiding whisper, just stillness. You are safe, warm, and the ancient woods are far away, existing only in the whispers of history and the corners of your imagination. Let your body relax, releasing any tension from that long, strange trek. The sounds of the forest fade, replaced by quiet. Drift now with the sense that you've journeyed to the edge of something very old and very slow and returned safely.